why do movie sets need 30 different people on set in the day? That is so silly.
I just rock up in my pajamas and people are like, who's this crazy ginger? And I'm like, I own the place. But
the same stuff is being brought out every day because the studios just follow a certain formula.
I kind of view them as like big TikTokers.
And it's all about now the quantity over the quality, and that's definitely something that's slightly upsetting.
are you in this for the art or in it for like just the money or the business?
Be decisive. Just be decisive, make a decision and stick with it.
In our side of the industry, it's as if people chase burnout.
I wake up at 3 a.m. and I turn on like
Exactly,
3
yeah.
edits by like in half an hour, and then I go to the gym.
Then I red light my balls and, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, animals and aliens, welcome back to the podcast show. We're doing another very exciting creator session where I'm joined by our first repeat guest, semi/host today in Stark Lui. Thank you for joining me again. And then two gentlemen who are, I'm going to say, much more astute in the world of cinematography than definitely myself. So more in the, I'm going to say, the film side of content creation rather than the social media. So Adam Hansen and Alex Ortscheit, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Steve.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
I was super lucky because I was running a little bit behind schedule today, setting up all the lights and everything. We're in a new space today, which is amazing, courtesy of Cam Kernahan, so thank you very much. And I hadn't got a chance to practice setting up lights here or getting everything done, and then Stark Lui, you rocked up and chatted some nonsense for a bit, so I was really behind on the setup time. Unfortunately, you two are very patient, but very fortunately got your extreme lighting expertise to help us get up and running today. So it's more, if it looks bad, it's not my fault, it's their fault.
We changed everything. So it was like this, and then he came and completely changed the entire setup. So
No, but I think it's looking fantastic. So thank you for your guidance today.
Happy to help, dude.
You two, I think from what I've seen when I was trying to do a little bit of a stalk to find out a bit more about, what work you keep doing and everything. It seems like almost all the projects I'm seeing, you two are working together on them. So maybe you can tell me a bit about kind of how your relationship together sort of started, how you ended up working together on projects and kind of what some of those have been like.
Why don't you start?
Yeah, so we actually met back in film school after Cape Town. I moved here from East London, specifically to study film, and there we sort of butted heads, I think, in our first year at some point. And from there, I think once we got into our second year, we sort of started to realize that we had a very sort of similar way of communicating our vision, or actually wanting to hop on the same page, and we just gelled really well together. At that point, Alex had realized that he wanted to be a cinematographer, and I was very much in line with wanting to be a director, writer, producer, and that's pretty much how we came into contact. And since then, we've tried to work on as many projects as possible together. We just sort of gel well, and that's why whenever one of us sort of happens upon someone who's got something nice and creative and juicy for us to latch onto, we will always involve the other to basically get that input and make sure we can continue that sort of relationship.
Yeah, we rarely get to work on actual jobs together, but because we have such good synergy, whenever a creative passion project comes through, that's, Adam will be the go-to director that I'll run to if I've got something interesting to do.
Oh, super nice. I am a novice to the worlds of AFTA and film school, as Stark coined the phrase of YTU. That was my educational journey into diving into the world of content creation on YouTube.
What is YTU?
YouTube University.
Okay.
Hey.
All right.
Plug there. We're coining the term. You started it, and now it's here to stay. Obviously, studying at an institution sort of like AFTA, does everyone sort of just arrive on day one, and then a lot of people, I'm going to say, are like complete novices to the world? They just know they want to be in the industry, and you kind of find your feet along the way, or how does that sort of process develop? And like you said, you wanted to go more into the realm of sort of directing and stuff while you were still studying, and you're obviously a lot more in the world of cinematography. Did that sort of develop while you were studying, or did you kind of go into it sort of knowing, okay, cool, this is the direction I'm aiming?
Yeah, there's a bit of everything, hey. It's when you arrive in first year, it's a big soup of a whole bunch of people. Either, it goes from people who know exactly what they want to be doing. They want to be a director, or they want to be a music composer. And then there's the other part of the people who are there because they don't really know what they want to do, and film kind of feels interesting, or they kind of want to step into acting. So it's just a real pool of different bunch of people. But I guess for Adam and myself, we always wanted to be filmmakers. I wanted to be a director at first, but then I sort of realized I lacked a few of the qualities necessary for a director to thrive, and I realized that my main passion was the visual aspect of storytelling, and so that's why I kind of set my sight on cinematography as my main discipline.
What do you think like really grabbed you about sort of the world of cinematography and actually being behind the camera and controlling it sort of?
I really like, I guess the best way to compare it is to comic books. I love the way comic books deliver an emotion with the pictures, and with, you know, seeing the sequence of pictures kind of delivering the way the story is being unfolded. I really love the way that how things are told from a visual perspective. So that's why I
dove into it. And the world of directing, Adam, where did that sort of passion just grab you, and how did that kind of I'm gonna say become sort of the area of focus that you've kind of pursued thereafter?
I'd always been interested in doing something, whether it was in the like field of animation or illustration. I always wanted to try and get my ideas out of my head. And
your Instagram is filled with the most like insane drawings and stuff as well. So
that's sort of the outlet. I mean, things kind of started for me. I always loved, and that was the easiest way in my own capacity. I mean, growing up, I didn't have my own crew or friends who were particularly interested in those sorts of things. So that was a way for me to, in the way that Alex is talking about comic books, that would be a way to tell a story. And eventually I found at least one or two people who were willing to entertain my idea of making shorts and skits and things that just absolutely were horrendous, terrible, not good. They're all privated on my YouTube now, locked away forever.
I've also privated a few videos, and if they ever come out, oof, oh dear.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that.
It's such a nice feature to have, to be able to hide things, like just, you know, to keep for the memory's sake, but not quite have for the deep dark stalks to pop out.
Exactly. No, it's a special thing to be able to create together with people, and the main thing is that then pointed me in my direction of being like, oh, actually, I want to be a director. I enjoy working a lot more with live action, even though it was these silly things, which is kind of like essentially just playing in a toy box with your friends after school. That was it was lots of fun. I think you had that as well. You did a lot of stuff on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I did a lot of little action videos, very basic, very action-centered, you know, lots of visual effects. You know, I grew up watching a lot of Freddie Wong and Corridor Digital, and those videos always inspired me to do a little bunch of action short clips. And that's when I realized that I was actually really into that process of filmmaking, and that I had this understanding of driving a story through visuals and editing and just, you know, putting things together with music and all that stuff. And I took a lot of pleasure in doing that. I was I'd like to do this on a bigger scale. Let's see how that goes.
I think it's always so remarkable for me that like for the first time someone goes about like finding that sort of like creative spark, especially in the video telling sort of narrative. I think one of the first times it struck for me was on some school project for like drama or something. We had to create a little video. I think this was in like grade 8 or 9, like way back when. And then in our little group, we had 2 of us who each tried to create a video, and they chose the other guy's video because mine was crap. But I really enjoyed like actually making the thing, and then I went and did the whole science degree and stuff afterwards, and somehow found my way back to it afterwards. So Paul Richardson, if you're ever watching this, I know that you're much more talented than me. I acknowledge, and I bow down to you. I know, but it's always so fascinating for me how that like first spark of sort of creativity kind of comes to the fore.
What did you say your qualification was that you did before?
I did a degree in molecular biology and biotech.
Well. Sounds like the better career choice to me.
Somewhere along the journey, a GoPro popped into the picture, like, you know, typical university nonsense. And then Sam Calder popped up onto the YouTube feed, and then I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Got to do this. And then, you know, just it kind of spiraled from there. Where did your camera love sort of start?
So I think my father always had like recordings and stuff, like a studio for his preachings and
Yes,
for YouTube. But also, like you mentioned with Corridor and Freddie Wong, was also two channels which highly motivated me into starting videography and the like the directing and the storytelling side of things. But somewhere along that line, I had to make the choice: am I going to go more for the cinema side or more to the commercial and freelancing or wedding side of things? But otherwise, I would have been sitting with you guys there. But now I'm more on the freelancing side.
What kind of pushed you, do you think, in the more freelancing direction and the sort of world of film?
So I love my parents, of course. But I think there was always, when I started high school, I was like, I'm not going to study. I'm going to do... I already even knew that I'm not going to do film school because my father had a few contacts with directors and cinematographers from the US, and all of them advised not to go to film school, which is something I also want to chat about with you guys who did go to film school. And then, even in high school, I was like, I'm not even supposed to be here because this is not what I'm going to plan on doing, but my parents, for some reason, wanted that reassurance. So then it was like, okay, then I have to start going into the wedding side of things. And that was also more easier because it feels like you make progress because you're doing something. While I think with you guys, you wait months sometimes to do something which you consider like a big gig or such. Well, we just see it as like, oh, if it's a 2-camera setup, it's a big gig. So I think it's easier to fall for the one because it seems more promising than the other one. But that's what I also said in the previous podcast. I want to go back into the film side of things.
Oh, now we're kind of holding you two hostage here. So on the sort of the film sort of world, how much do you think the industry has sort of changed of late? Do you think it is changing? Is it sort of the same it kind of always was? It feels like with the advent for me of like social media and from my tiny little scope of perspective that like content has changed in a sense where it's a lot more short format. People's attention spans are a lot less, and a lot of the big budgets for a lot of either film projects or any kind of TVCs have largely been absorbed or distributed across like a lot of more short format snackable sort of content. Do you kind of feel that in the industry, or is that just my perception from an outsider sort of perspective?
No, I definitely feel that a lot in the industry. It's social media has changed everything with how things have been developing. That and the development of amazing technology, being able to shoot such high quality content with such tiny cameras, and everything becoming a bit cheaper as well. But like you said, people having a shorter attention span thanks to platforms like TikTok, Instagram, etc. It just changed the way people, well, if we look at the advertising world, it changed the way companies would then, market things. And it turns out that they are able to reach a wider audience if they, use those platforms rather than your good old TV, which nowadays a lot of, young people don't really watch anymore. It's mostly, your phone. And so that obviously has changed the nature of which, then advertisers and agencies look at pushing products forward or things like that. So it has definitely impacted our industry. Things have become a lot smaller in terms of sets and shorter productions. And I don't know where to start because there's just so much to cover on that, really.
Well, I mean, what's interesting for you as well, what you've told me is you're a director of photography, but you will often be on shoots as the social media guy almost. Like you're the one who's covering the social media aspects, whether you're focus pulling or whether you're shooting it yourself. How's that for you?
So I've got to also explain that I'm, as a junior director of photography, I still do a lot of jobs as a focus puller. And that has changed a lot as well as social media shoots have kind of skyrocketed. I used to work on a lot of TVC, so TV commercials, higher budgets, bigger crews, bigger camera setups. And now as the years have gone by, especially since COVID, I'm now on more and more smaller shoots with smaller budgets, smaller cameras, and a lot of these are now a lot of social media campaigns and these types of small gigs. The pay or the nature of the job doesn't really change, but the whole dynamic on set has changed, and the whole way of tackling concepts has also changed quite a bit.
Do you think guys like Matt and I, who more focus on the social media side of things, made it more difficult for guys like you to at first get gigs, since most of the clients went over to smaller format as well?
I think there's a lot more to it than that. I don't think that's really
Like a
really
direct impact.
Can I butt in
Yeah.
quickly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Riveting.
So what's happened
Absolutely
with
riveting.
a lot of the things that I end up working on or directing, it's also social media focused. I mean, most of these things, like, nothing's really going to TV if you're doing something that's a little bit like, mid-budget, low budget, those sorts of things. And a lot of that sort of corporate work that I'm involved in, it's often undercut by people who are more versed, or people who act as one-man bands, such as yourselves. Like, you go and you are the full package. You don't need a sound guy anymore. You don't need some, like, the director necessarily. I mean, often you'll go there and say you're with a client. They will mostly know what they want or what they need, hopefully. And with that, they can give you enough guidance where you can run with it, and you position, whether it's an actor, whether it's someone who works for the company, no matter who it is, like, you can actually do that yourselves and run with it. And because it's only one person, the point of contact is streamlined. It's instead of dealing with a whole team or even two people, it's at the end of the day, you guys are there. So that makes things a lot better for, I think, the client side. It makes things like, it makes them, how do I put it? It makes it easier for them to be spur of the moment, which you need to be with things like social media. As soon as there's something topical going on with the company or something that's going to affect the company, they can hop on and say, we need you to quickly go and do this, or
Yeah,
we
it's
need
not
you
a
to shoot this.
3 month
Really, like,
process.
2 days.
the turnaround time is super fast. Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly. That's,
And it's all about now the quantity over the quality, and that's definitely something that's slightly upsetting, I must say.
It's actually, in my experience, going back. I think lockdown with TikTok switched the industry, especially for social media, complete 180. But I think what I've heard just through following the trends is everyone is going back into the long form content, especially for brands or even their personal content. Yeah. But this is mainly for, like, social media, not like something that's for social media but then being boosted as an ad. This is just for that organic growth. The videos that's more than a minute, longer than a minute, is actually starting to get more traction. So that's also the thing. I think we're very dependent on social media and the trends, and that's constantly. You can confess it's constantly changing. I think with you guys, it's a bit slower before it, with my understanding.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of doing social media jobs and following those trends, because, well, it's also advertising has never been the reason why I went into this industry. Whenever I get something that's advertising related or social media related, I always look at it as just another job. Yeah. It's not something I'm super passionate about. It's not something that I really try to understand or perfect too much, because my passion is in narrative storytelling, and that's why if I try to really work my brain around all those things like you guys have to, it would just maybe distract me a bit too much as to my real reason for doing this.
I'm really keen to touch on that and understand a bit more about what aspects of the sort of narrative filmmaking really sort of get you excited. What is it about that really kind of brings that creativity to light?
I mean, it all comes down to the reason why, I've decided to do this in the first place. I was introduced to cinema and movies mostly thanks to my mom, who would show me, film classics and things like that. I think it's the main thing that triggered something in my brain and made me fall in love with cinema. I would be watching those movies and it'd be making me feel so many different emotions. And, you'd be laughing your ass off, or you'd be crying your eyes out, and you wouldn't be like, what, a film has made me feel like this? That's incredible. How do I break that down? And then, and realizing how that is being done, it's then your passion is kind of sparked that way. Wow, I I want to create the same type of emotion for people. I want to tell stories that will make people think about certain topics or make them really emotional about certain things. And I guess that was my main drive, to kind of tell stories that would impact people the same way that I've been impacted by cinema. Yeah.
You find it quite. This is a question I understand if you guys can't answer it, but I think recently it's very difficult to find a movie that's not pushing some agenda or some message or something, and it's difficult to watch a movie and actually appreciate it for what it is. Is that also like a big thing in the industry? Is that just like the mainstream like movies and stuff, or is
I don't know. Can you state
indie
examples?
Okay, for example, Star Wars.
Okay.
They're pushing a lot of like that's what I'm saying. It gets a bit. They're pushing a lot of the LGBTQ things to points where the casting is more to push in an agenda than necessarily actually telling the story. Because you said now that it's a lot to do with the story, but if you look at modern cinema from my side, you actually see the opposite. And the other day I watched an anime, The Boy and the Heron, I think.
Yes, yeah.
It was the first movie where I could actually switch off and not feel like the casting is because of this, or the story is because of this, or the directing because of this.
This is how I know I'm just not artsy, because I watched that movie and I was just so confused the whole way through. I'll be honest.
love that movie.
I'm just not smart enough to understand all the nuances.
Fantastic. I think I know what you're saying, but I know that there are a lot of people who've sort of taken issue with those sorts of things of like almost like a casting to cast sort of situation. But the thing for me is I'm often pro that sort of stance, because the main thing is that it's the kind of, let's say, the first time that, say, a studio like Disney is trying to, push this and make sure that they get as many people represented and included and those sorts of things. And I don't think it's going to be perfect, like straight off the bat. They're going to create characters purely to be there as, sort of a representation, ticking a box kind of means, instead of someone who is, or a character that's organically created for the story, that originated from the story, those sorts of things. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's all part of the transition to try and include more voices like these, to represent these kinds of people on screen. I know a lot of people have taken issue with it, but I think it's I think it's just the sort of thing, I don't want to say messy, but it's sort of like they've got to find their feet and really like make sure that it works and, sort of get it up and running off the ground. And because of that, sort of it being maybe like the first time or the first few years, decades maybe, it's just going to take a while for that to really sit properly, I guess. But that's the way that I look at it. And it's sometimes it might come across as forced, or maybe it's something where it's especially I think a lot of people take issue where it's like, oh, this character wasn't there from the source material.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can get that. You want to see your accurate retelling of the original vision or whatever it was, but I think it's really important to have that in, because you're going to start seeing a lot more success with those sorts of things. People will come up with fantastic characters, and you actually have this represented across the board where it all feels completely organic, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I don't really. I completely understand what you mean. To me, it's more like you mentioned the story side of things, and it feels to me that great if they want to incorporate more people and keep it broad and everything. I think that's super cool, because there have been voices that has something to say that didn't have the opportunity or the platform, and which created great stuff. I'm talking more in the sense of when they make these casting things, they're focusing more on like those aspects than the actual story, and which I think is I'm not saying directors like Steven Spielberg didn't try to incorporate his agendas or messages or whatever, but I think the story was always the main focus, which I think just in today, I think they're trying so much to figure out what's like how they're gonna include everything, that the actual reason behind why people enjoy watching movies, goes a bit missing.
Weird for me is seeing the sort of technology developments for some of these massive studios like the Disney production centers and everything, especially with like the massive screen technologies that they're bringing in. That takes away the need to go to other places and build like super elaborate sets. They basically just do everything, not VFX wise, but like it's just one
studio.
massive thing. Does it kill it a bit, or does it take the art away, or how are you guys sort of viewing that from a filmmaker sort of perspective, watching these sort of things come out? It seems like with endless speed, it just seems like they're pumping these things out now.
I mean, yeah, technology is like it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these studio movies will feel very bland and very plastic because you can see that it's all made in studio, and you can see that there's not a lot of energy brought into the action by the actors that don't feel like they're in the environment, or then there's other aspects like lazy writing or things like that. But coming back to the technology aspect of it and just pumping movies out, yeah, things can get very, I'd say you can easily get very desensitized because the same stuff is being brought out every day because the studios just follow a certain formula of what is going to give them revenue more than, okay, how do we create good art that is going to touch people?
I kind of view them as like big TikTokers where they find like the things that go viral and then they just copy paste that just again and again.
That's what it is. It's really that. Follow a recipe. As long as it works, you just keep doing it.
They're just doing that at a budget level that is a bit beyond the average content.
Bigger risks.
Yeah, it's a shame because I mean when you talk about them just sort of pumping it out as if it's content, just sort of to feed the audience, implement phase 74 or whatever it is they're on now. The main thing is it used to be about making sure that almost when you had a director attached to a project, you knew you were going to see that style. I mean, if you think of
name coming up at the beginning, it's like, you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, it's like when you see, you mentioned Steven Spielberg earlier, you see that name and you're in for something interesting at the very least. He's a master. So when I see someone like Sam Raimi on Spider-Man, you're going to get something that's a bit like crazy, zany, perfect for a comic book movie. So he did the first 3 Spider-Man movies, and then after that, once Iron Man became such a success, you also had who was in charge of that? That was Jon Favreau. And that also like a fantastically told story. The building blocks are all there. Also like effects that I watched it the other day. It's really holds up well. The effects are fantastic, and the characterization is wonderful. Where it sort of went off the bridges in terms of those sorts of things, whether it's, and I'm talking about MCU mostly, but whether it's that or Star Wars or any sort of big property that's being churned, it could be Fast and Furious as well. The main thing is you're not seeing that voice that voice isn't coming through anymore. It's overseen by, I think, a lot of the heads of the studio, people who are exec producers, and because of that, you're getting something that's going to naturally just come out as the same. It'll look the same, it'll feel the same, and there's safety in that because they know that they can put out something and say, you're going to get exactly what you paid for in the last one, you're going to get in this one. And that's a shame because that sort of downplays, even though they're bringing in all this great technology like the volume, which I think is what you were mentioning earlier. It's not always used in the most amazing way. It's just used for efficiency's sake, as opposed to with something like the volume, like stunts can be safer. The lighting from that is way more realistic and ideal than having green flashing and showing over everyone. There's a little bit of depth coming through as well, and it's really exciting to see people be able to use that for a lot of projects. But when it's just for the sake of like a production line, it's a bit like, oh man.
Do you guys think there's too much money involved in the industry for them to take like new risks? Where it's like if they do something, I know because a lot of the NFL, like sports companies do this a lot, where there's so much riding on an athlete that they don't want to take risks. Do you think this is the same with like Hollywood?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It'll continue to be the case. It's always been the case, especially with the bigger studios. It's always been about money, revenue.
But even to the point where they like are too afraid to do something new that's going to...
Yes, exactly. Let's follow a trend, let's stay with it. But sometimes they'll bet on a dark horse, or they'll bet on some director that's that's done well for themselves and give them a couple $100 million
then
and see how that goes. If it goes well, then we continue those sequels. If not, well, then we put it in the toilet and move on to the next thing. Yeah.
And you think with all the screens and stuff, like the new technology, you think there's a rise again with a lot of practical effects? Because with the Corridor Digital crew, they've recently focused a lot on these practical effects. So do you think it's coming back in or not?
It really depends on who you ask, hey? And on the type of movie. I think, of course, practical effects are there to stay for as long as people are willing to spend the cash on those. You know, we continuously some directors like, I don't know, Christopher Nolan, for example, swears by, you know, doing practical effects over visual effects. You've got, you know, George Miller, you know, sure, Furiosa doesn't have as much practical effects as Fury Road did, but they still did, you know, a lot of it in the desert. So you know, same thing with Dune. You know, Denis was like, when Denis Villeneuve struck the deal to make the Dune movie with the studio, he was like, guys, if we do this, there's only one way I'm doing it. I'm going into the desert to do it for real. Yeah. You got it's that or nothing.
So
as long as people, you know, put their foot down and you know, advocate for that technique, yeah.
So what I'm getting is that a lot of the bigger, like very big budget things use both.
Yeah.
Like they make use of both
And
to get like the best results.
Yeah, and if you have a VFX heavy movie, I think having a balance between the two is the best way to do it. If you want a great visual effects movie, you have to do some of it as close to reality as possible, so that the visual effects department can replicate that or extend that to the grandeur that it's supposed to be, to have some form of frame of reference. You know, that's why it's so important to have a few. Let's say you have a lot of fire in a certain sequence. It's very good to have a few fires going on in the background, not to blow up the entire place, but just a few fire elements, so that the visual effects can work off of that, replicate the same thing in post. Exactly. Yeah. So I think a great movie is a combination. A great visual effects-based movie is a combination of.
Yeah, if they have the time and budget for it.
Of course.
Yeah, it definitely enhances it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where if you're an enthusiast of seeing something shot on 35mm or on 70mm, one of those larger film formats, it's one of those things where you go to people and you can say, like, you can feel the warmth, you can feel the energy from that, even though you can't maybe always see it. You know, someone who's going to the movies might not pick up on it instantly, but it's something that you more feel. It's the same with incorporating practical effects and CGI. The two complement each other in such a fantastic way. And you can see, especially in something like Mad Max Fury Road, the way that those complement each other, because they did all of those stunts, all of those crashes for real, and composited them in such a way that they composed the whole scene. And because of that, it just feels so much. There's so much more on the line. You're sucked in. You just feel that debris and the glass and everything just smashing all over the place. And you know it's not. You can almost, your eye just can tell it's not something fake. It's not something that's just there. And that makes a huge difference when you're watching a movie. I think that's why I think it's quite reactive, like the way that you have someone like Christopher Nolan being so insistent on using as few CGI shots, as few VFX shots as possible, just because he wants it to feel real. He wants to go back to that sort of, say, like the more old-fashioned way, where you're forced to think a little bit smarter, not think, oh, okay, cool, we've got my mic is green and we'll turn it into a gun later. You know, it's all about, the main thing about films is making
some pressure on me over here now.
No, it's like you're supposed to make choices, and if the more planning you do and the more well executed those things are for real, I think that it's much more believable. The energy's there. It's just
more spectacular.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's also something I find with just with our side and the social media side, because you think you can get away with, because you can actually get away with not planning so much in advance. Like there is some shoots, like a wedding, you can you can check your gear, you can do this, but I always find that when I just on the way to the shoot, at least have a story in mind. Even if it's just a wedding where you can't really tell a story because everything is dependent on what's happening around you, I always find that it does end up better if I at least have 10% of an idea there. If I have 20, it's even better, or 30, it's even better. So no, I agree that the planning is more for the freelancers out there, for you guys that don't plan for the shoots.
Yeah, you're
No one
touching on a
does.
subject that is definitely also a big part of the reason why I prefer narrative storytelling, or at least, you know, a bigger prepped kind of project, is because I'm a filmmaker who loves to be extra prepared and have everything, let's say, everything visualized before we actually go into production. You know, sure, I love an improvised shoot every now and again, but when it comes to storytelling, I love to have an edit, and like the actual edit in mind before we even start production. You know, extensive shot listing, storyboarding, and making sure we already know exactly how we want this film or this project to be before we even started shooting it. That's just my preferred way of doing it.
Also speeds up the process quite a lot in the editing and the shooting and everything.
Yeah.
Makes everything so much faster.
Leaves less room for error.
That planning aspect is something that I've particularly really struggled with myself. I think maybe because I came from the world of like that self-taught sort of thing and figuring it out sort of as I go along. And a lot of my learning only comes when I'm actually editing things afterwards. I'm like, okay, cool, mad transition over there. It kind of works. And maybe being limited by largely being sort of a one-man crew in a lot of the situations has never really allowed me to hone the skills of how to go about planning sort of a proper shoot and getting every, you know, bit in place. But I think as I'm learning skills and developing, it's becoming more integral to actually successfully pulling something off in a way that's replicatable again and again later on. Or if someone says it must look like this, it will look like that. What I'm going to say techniques or what practices have you found that have allowed you to be better prepared in crafting any stories that you're trying to tell, whether it's for brand work or any of your own sort of passion projects? What kind of helps along with that planning process?
I think first it's mindset. Make sure that whatever happens, you just will accept the circumstances and try to make the best of it. Whatever plan you lay out, things are going to fall apart. Things are going to fail, and you're going to have to be able to deal with it without panicking. I think that's the first thing. Just setting in mindset that be ready to kill your darlings if you have to, and in terms of being then prepared, is just first of all communication with your crew. Make sure that everyone is on the same page, and regarding everything. I think there's so much to it. I mean, I don't know. Can you jump on?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you were saying in terms of your crew, making sure everyone has the exact sort of idea, everyone's aligned with, whether you're doing like a small corporate shoot or you're doing a feature film, everyone must sort of be aligned with whatever vision you're setting out to do. You've got this mission down. Everyone's there to make this movie at the end of the day, or make this production at the end of the day, and they want to make it the best thing it could possibly be. The main thing is to just, give people the respect that they deserve, inform them as much as possible, and that's a thing that, comes with practice. It came very slowly for me to make sure that everyone is on the same page. You know what you're setting out to achieve, so that in the case where you've got your plan down, no matter how perfect it is, whether it's like, it's locked in, there will be something to solve on the day. There will be a problem that arises that is out of your control. And the main thing is that as long as your crew is informed, you can all work together and problem solve together to get, something that is still true to what you set out to achieve. Even if it's something that's almost entirely different, it still maintains that sort of soul and that energy. And I think that's a huge benefit of, planning very far in advance, as opposed to, rocking up on the day and improving full on, which does have its beauty. It's just that the main thing is finding that balance. For me, when I was doing TV, and this is something that I think really got after I'd finished doing that sort of work, but I would be so tuned in to the format of the show, and this needs to be ticked off, and this needs to be done, and this needs to be done, that I wasn't allowing any room for crew or myself to really improvise and get the magic on the day. the main thing is that you have your scheduling, you've got your plans, you've got all the creative behind you to make sure, like, okay, great, this is in place and this can hopefully run smoothly. But the main thing is you must allow some sort of it's the mindset you spoke about. You must be ready to jump at whatever arises, whatever opportunity arises, to capture that. And whether it's to speed things up, whether it's to get something that looks a little bit better at the end of the day, it's going to make your production better, I think. Not locking yourself into a position where you have to follow that plan, but it's something to always fall back on and keep you informed as you go.
As I'm going to say a director limited by certain South African parameters, I think largely, I think we're quite limited oftentimes budget-wise with a lot of productions, and we have to work within sort of specific confines. How do you appreciate any sort of camera operators and stuff communicating their ideas for creativity to you without it kind of detracting from the vision of what you're looking to produce on the day?
I mean, I always value the input of a cinematographer, DOP coming in. The main thing is that I'll come to set, whether it's something that's, a spur of the moment kind of job or something we've been prepping for months, and being able to work out the shots with your DOP and get there and really see what's going to work the best is always something I'm open to. I'm never someone who is going to say, this is the exact thing and stick to that. Like, I'm not going to die on my hill just because I've come in and I've said, like, oh, this is what I want. This is the thing that I pictured in my head the whole time. And that's often the thing where I will go to someone like Alex and say, this is what I'm sort of picturing. And Alex will first of all tell me that's impossible, and then we'll work out how to actually get to something that.
Do I say that too often?
This is a little bit, but it's also because I'm harebrained. I'm always I'd rather reach way above here and then see where we land.
I guess this is also like touching on the previous question on how do we prepare ourselves. I guess on a practical level for me, that's also a lot of my job is trying to interpret whatever's going on in this man's brain. Say if we're collaborating and trying to figure out whether whatever's in here can be actually achieved on screen, and if yes, then how? And it's a lot of the time then certain steps have to be taken. And if I look at the director of photography mindset of things, making sure that your locations, you've scouted and rekied them, you trust your crew, you've got a good lighting, a good gaffer with you that you can trust in taking over the technical aspects if your knowledge is a bit limited, having a good first AC and a good second AC, then a good grip, and making sure that lighting plans have been made if you've got tricky lighting scenarios going on, understanding the gear that's out there, understanding what's best to pull off a certain shot, for example. And most importantly, be in tune with your director about how exactly they want to tell the story. That's the biggest part. How translating what's happening in their brain into something that can be practically achieved, right?
I think something that's also like a big part of this, especially if you because we've been working together for years, so we're quite in tune. And the main thing is that I kind of try and bring that trust to any sort of working relationship that you're in. If you've chosen the person to work with, it's because you place a great deal of trust and confidence in their work. You trust that they're going to, help you execute your vision, and vice versa, and you guys are both going to get something magnificent out of it. And that is the thing, is that you show up and you explain what you want, and we look at all the options. And the main thing is then I'm not some sort of master of lighting. I'm also not someone who comes from a camera trained background. That was never really my focus. My focus was more in terms of writing and conceptualizing and those sorts of things. That's where I've always stuck to my guns in those sorts of way. But that's why I place a great deal of trust in Alex, because I'll explain to him and he will understand the tone, understand the sort of look we're going for, especially once we've got our references sorted. We even base things off of stuff we've shot before. We're lucky to have that sort of point of reference as well. And I think because of that, we're very lucky to be able to be in that sort of space. And even when you do, even if you do butt heads or like you clash over something and decide maybe it's not looking the exact way it should be, I will say maybe, oh, this isn't what I was quite thinking. I might have suggested something to Alex where he looks at it and goes, yeah, but actually, if we face just that way, it's going to be that much better. It's those sorts of things. It's never like, it's having that respect where you know that you're both wanting the best thing at the end of the day, whether it's a music video or telling a story or even just an ad or something corporate. You both want the best for each other's work. And I think you can't go wrong in that sort of sense.
I love how you said almost every conversation is explaining how things are going to be impossible to achieve. I think that must be like 90% of DOP director conversations ever. Like every single.
I hope it's not just me.
I don't want to sound pessimistic about things. I don't want to sound like a DOP that will shut down things that directors pitch, because then who will hire you, right?
Just
if you tell them
being
something is
realistic,
impossible,
yeah.
that's time.
Do you find it difficult because in a sense you're just being realistic?
Yes.
Because if you also keep in mind like the budget or what you can get with the equipment you have, because you're the DOP, you know the equipment that you guys are using. But have you found working with directors that it becomes an issue where they want you to do it and then you're like, hey, I think this or this?
Well, then you just have to be straight up with them and help them understand, yes, okay, we can try to do what you have in mind, but this is what I'm thinking it's going to end up looking like. As long as you cover yourself and say, look, just be straight up honest with it. With the means that we have, I believe it's going to end up looking like this, and you're not going to be able to achieve that specific look.
Yeah, so as long as you not give another problem.
No. Just always try to offer solutions. Always, try your best to, carry the vision through.
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't promise things that you can't. Don't make promises you can't keep.
Yeah. Because that's the thing I struggle a lot with when having people having to shoot something for me for social media or a wedding or something is there's always problems, and they only bring problems. While working with people in the film industry, it's such a big thing where you're not supposed to bring a problem, bring a solution. And that's why I sometimes hope some people at least have the knowledge where it's like, oh, I forgot my camera, but so I'm just going to go home. Instead of being like, see if you have a friend nearby that has a camera, at least do something.
It's quite the dilemma.
That's probably the
I would have said something like, forgot.
It hasn't happened before to me, a friend, but
Oh, fantastic.
Guys, they blew up the building. We don't have a location.
Another aspect of that whole process that I'm curious about is obviously on a lot of these productions with a lot of different people involved from the camera crew side and the director side and just the whole production crew that makes things viable. Like if you've got one really weak link in that, kind of it this is a bottleneck for everything. What are some things that typically sort of go wrong or make everyone's else lives on set just an absolute mission? Like what are things that are just that people do or things that can go wrong that are just like, oh, not this guy being like this? Like what makes things difficult?
Be decisive. Just be decisive, make a decision and stick with it. And that's something that took me a long. I'm not saying that
No, I think this is directed at clients, isn't it?
No, I'm talking about anyone. Like no matter where you are. Like if you're the client, if you're the producer, if you're the director, especially if you're the director. Unfortunately, there've been very very many times where, especially starting out, I was not confident in making the decision that I was sort of giving to the crew, and it was maybe this, maybe that, maybe we have got all these options that we can do, and of course you always have options that you can go for. But the main thing is, together with your team, make a decision and stick with it. And if it's not, you end up there and you've got some time to rectify, and it's not exactly like the best thing. You've already got something at least. You've arrived at the usable angle, the usable take, and hopefully you have some time to correct that if it's not too much of a squeeze. The main thing is you're going to hold everyone up by not making that decision. Everyone just needs some sort of way to go. It doesn't matter where you are on that chain.
No, I like that. I think that's so true. Especially like you set up your first shot for the day. It takes 2 hours or something. Like no, let's try it. We need to change the angle. Sorry guys. No, the first angle, that was the one. Let's go back to that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's the thing. At least you have had the time where you can go back to that. Hopefully, I mean that's something you want to always avoid. And I think that's also I'm picking up a client thing there as well. But the main thing is that you've at least sort of you've gone and figured those out. The decision's been made, and that just makes things a little bit easier, I guess, or simpler.
Especially on bigger productions, because a very small decision can impact everything about how the shoot is going. A very small change of mind from a director. Okay, we're not going to shoot on this balcony anymore. We're going to shoot on the balcony that's over there, for example. That changes everything for everybody on set.
Everything needs to go over.
Exactly. It's the small logistical things that end up, small little decisions that end up being a massive logistical change for everybody. So, yeah, being decisive and sticking to your guns about things. Unless, of course, it turns out that you have to change your mind, then rely on people's input around you to help you change things. But yeah.
There's some behind the scenes that I've watched of directors working. It's very fly on the wall. They're just filming them setting up for this shot, and there's one director who sets up for a long tracking shot. Focusing on this woman who's walking all the way across the streets of, I think, somewhere in Paris, and she arrives at her home and walks in, and there's a part where they show the director going through the shot. The shot's taken hours to set up, and it's like they're going on. No one's in a big rush, but it's a feature. There's time constraints, but he goes through the motions. They do one rehearsal, and he turns to the crew and just says, "I'm so sorry, but that's just not. I was wrong. This is not the vision. We unfortunately do this and that. It's going to take this amount of time to probably, set up that." And they scratch the entire shot and end up going for something completely different. And I think that's also very important, is to have that humility to, turn around and be like, who made that dumb decision? And you can go, oh, actually, you know what? That was me. That's my bad. But you know what? I've spotted it. Let's go and, do the actual smart thing, something that's going to stick with both the vision and also not screw us for time.
I think that's something more to do with not being very prideful of yourself or having an ego, because I think a lot of people, doesn't matter in which industry, they make a decision and then all of a sudden everyone's looking at them and now they're the leader, and then now they have to say, hey, the decision that I made was wrong. Now everyone's going to think that he's a loser or something. So I think it's what you're saying is just more to do with having... not getting too attached to your first initial idea, basically.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. Leave your ego at the door. Yeah. It's important to have a little bit, because then it shows you've got some confidence in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But don't.
Yeah, there's a difference between confidence and ego, you would say.
Yeah. No, definitely.
That I think that perfectly extends to the realm of much smaller freelance projects as well, because I've had a few projects previously where clients come up to me and said, "Oh no, don't you think it needs a light or something here?" And I've set this all up and everything. I'm like, no, it doesn't need a light. And then I think a couple of minutes later, I'm like, shit, this really needs some extra lights here. But I've been some of the earlier projects from a couple of years back, I was too embarrassed to kind of reframe that whole way of thinking and say, okay, cool, actually, for the sake of making this better, I do actually need to change things here, and that input was valid. I don't need to be the expert on all this. What matters is the sort of end result. And I was too prideful there, like you said, to make those corrections. It's something I've had to learn to be a lot more adaptable now. So I love that you've touched on that, and I think it extends to the world of much smaller projects too. Going away from sort of films and stuff, and one thing which, scrolling across both of your socials, I was like, yes, I've got a chance to ask these guys about it. I've never ever filmed a music video before. I've done plenty different other short form content, any of the corporate weddings, almost absolutely everything, but I've never somehow touched the world of music video creation. I think you guys worked on a project together. I think it was Shallow Graves for Metro Villa, where I think you were directing, you led the DOP team. How did that whole project sort of come together, and what does it take to actually make a music video work?
You start us off. You got us in there.
Oh, did I? Yeah, it's true.
You did, yeah.
It's true. Well, you know, I knew the guitars from the band. You know, we go from. I mean, we didn't go to high school together, but I've known him since those days. And I just, yeah, he approached me and he was asking me if, you know, I could do a music video for him. I was like, yeah, you know, sure. I mean, I love doing those. So I roped Adam into the project. And yeah, I mean, sorry, what was the question again? In terms of
How do you film a music video?
how do you film a music video?
I always watch all of them, and there's just so much happening that I'm just like, how did people go about planning to make this thing? Are you just recording the song like 20 different times, or what does it actually take to pull something like that off?
There's no secret sauce to it. Everyone's got a different way of doing it. It also depends on whether you're going to do a performance, a type of music video. That's a music video where, you know, the musicians are just doing their performance thing, and then you just shoot that. And
that was very similar to what you guys
yeah,
did
yeah, yeah.
before.
And then you've got also narrative-based or, you know, experimental videos where a lot more, let's say, artsy things happen, or there's an actual story through it. Or you can mix everything together and makes a soup of incomprehensible but fun to watch type of stuff. This music video was to be a performance video from the get-go, because that's what the band was looking for. A lot of the time, I think we also get, we get restricted by budgets, of course, and, you know, limitations. How do we go about shooting music videos? Specifically, Adam and I, we focus a lot on the song. We listen to it countless times. We brainstorm on ideas, on concepts, on how we can, on what kind of images pop through our minds. If it's going to be a performance music video, it's a bit easier than a narrative music video, because then we just need to focus on shooting the musicians. But then we have to figure out how to make it a bit more interesting than just a bunch of musicians performing the song on camera and that's it. So,
yeah, but that's the thing, is because you in particular do a lot of performance videos for a lot of Cape Town-based artists, and those always turn out really nice. But the challenge is to make sure that they all have their own, you know, personality. They've got the unique style. They represent who the band is. I mean, they're all going to be on screen, you know, playing their own instruments or singing or whatever it is. The main thing for us is just to basically, you know, incorporate as much of the energy of the actual song, take that and incorporate that aesthetically to have them, whether it's the location they're in or whether it's the way that Alex chooses to light it. It's all coming down to that. And particularly for Shallow Graves, we were lucky enough to hear a sort of near finished version of the song when we were starting to, you know, wrap our heads around it and conceptualize and meet with the band and sort of tell them what we had in mind. And the main thing was just sort of, I had this, you know, I love that kind of music. That's the kind of stuff that I listen to. And because of that, it was a lot easier for me to sort of be, you know, very tuned in and say it should be in this sort of abandoned location. We need a lot of texture that's grungy. We want there to be a lot going on.
Where did you film that, if I can ask?
It's at a place called the Woodmill, which is in Stellenbosch. But that is, they've got a lot there, and it's mostly for, I think, a lot of CakeNet shows filmed there. There are quite a few big productions that end up shooting there. It's a place with a lot of variety. The main thing is, yeah, always.
Of course.
But yeah, that was a great location to get because it had enough of the variety of the spaces. We wanted to split up the first, second, and third bits of the song, 4 if you include the bridge in that as well. And that's kind of how we, you know, try to ensure that it will remain interesting, even though it's essentially, you know, like these 4 very talented instrumentalists all going about their thing and re-performing the song. We wanted to make sure that there's something, you know, new for people to look at in every verse, every chorus. There's something new to look at, and I think because that space had so much to offer, and we were able to get into really cool parts of that. So the main thing was I wanted to find something to try and wrap this all together. The main thing was to incorporate this sort of element of a zoetrope, which is essentially one of those very like old inventions where you would place frames inside of one. It's almost like shaped like a biggish drum. And then when you spin that and look through the slits on the side, on the outside, you get sort of like a looping GIF of someone walking around or jumping. And I wanted to almost use that as a way to incorporate or to influence the pacing, to have these sort of random flashes as if you're looking through one, as if these guys are stuck inside one in this old abandoned location representing this old abandoned zoetrope. That's something for them to be stuck in, and that sort of motivates the pacing and the energy and the look that you're sort of going for. And it's why throughout the video there are lots of like these, these blank flashes that appear. It's almost, keeping up that illusion. Yeah. Kind of that was sort of as long as you have some sort of motivating aesthetic, or at least some sort of idea that you can wrap it all in, that's what you should be using to, even if you're approaching a performance video. There should be, an aim, a clear vision for that, just so that everything is cohesive and, it fully sells the whole vibe of the song.
It took us a long time to actually shoot that video because either we had conflicting schedules or locations fell through. I think twice we had to reschedule the shoot because of locations falling through. Music videos are a tough thing to pull together because there's no money involved in that. It's purely just feeding our soul. We get stuck doing so much corporate stuff that we kind of lose ourselves in that, and we forget why we do this. So music videos are usually a great way to escape some of that and come back to why we're doing this. It's a lot of fun, but it's very challenging. We had to reschedule this shoot twice because of conflicting schedules or locations falling through, and a lot of the time it's very exhausting because you maybe only get 1 day or 2 days to shoot just so many takes. You were asking things, how do we go about it? Well, we go about it shooting the same thing over and over and over and over again. How many times
do you actually have to go through the song?
I wouldn't be able to tell you. Probably close to 100 times, eh?
It's for you. Realistically, it's probably very close to 100 times, especially when you're taking the approach that we're doing, which is that you're shooting different portions of the song in different spaces, specifically with that video, because you're then listening to the first bit over and over and over again. You might be doing something that's only for maybe a 5-second portion of the song as well, and you listen to that part over and over and over and over again. And you've got to do things, specifically with a lot of music videos that we've done in the past, we often work with a higher frame rate so that we can slow it down in the edit. So we'll shoot things at 50 frames per second and then slow it down later, which means that in order to account for that, the artist often has to sing or play at twice the speed, so that when you slow it down, it ends up playing back and they look like they're singing in, normal time. Yeah. So even though they're moving in slow motion, their mouth is still, or their playing is still completely in sync with what they're doing. So it becomes a bit of a chaotic thing where you might be doing it twice. You might be doing it for that slow-mo version, or you might be doing it as well for the normal version. So you'll be doing the same scene at both speeds and then listening to the song again at each of those phases. With this one in particular, we wanted the beginning before, the actual sort of harder rock section of the song starts. I wanted it to be very dreamy and floaty, that same sort of thing. So we had them do the first, 50 seconds of the song in that sort of slow motion way where they're singing at 1.5 times the speed. The song was unfortunately too fast to do double the speed. No one would have been able to do that. It's just insane. And then once it hits the more rapid, higher tempo part of that song, then everything is filmed at 25 frames per second at real time. So at least we're not making them do things at double the speed. It's just really funny to watch people do those sorts of things. When you're looking back at the raw footage and watching them all, just sort of...
that must be the most absurd process to film that. I listen to all my podcasts on 2.3 times speed just so I can get through them all. But music, particularly, you want to appreciate it at the pacing it's sort of supposed to go at. So to try to perform it that must have been crazy.
Yeah,
listening to it 20 times over at that speed.
Oh yeah, performing it over and over again. Yeah, it gets very tedious for the musicians. Yeah. But it's just something I guess myself and Adam love to do is give ourselves a lot of options. I want to keep things interesting, and that means cutting a lot, having a lot of angles, having a lot of different locations to bounce between. And I think that's why having a higher pace edit calls for more angles, more takes, thankfully, the musicians are very patient with us, and they understand. And yeah, it's. I think we've got. I think we can be thankful to the musicians for bearing with us and
Hell yeah.
staying and staying on set with us until 2 a.m. Things like that. It's.
I just want to put in an example because you said obviously it's important for us specifically because something like that we were editing it ourselves, so we want to be able to we have all the options we could possibly need there. But to put the shoot into perspective, particularly the second day where we're shooting the bridge, we're shooting some effect stuff, and we're shooting the second chorus as well. What happened was that everyone's doing this after hours. We all have like our day jobs where we actually earn money, including the band. We all rock up sometime around after 5ish at location, and the whole time Alex is waiting and waiting and waiting to get his call sheet for the next day. And so we're sort of basing the way that the evening is going to go and how much we get along those lines. And just as we had set up for the first scene, which is to shoot that second chorus and the second verse, Alex gets his call sheet, and it was for some ridiculous time, like what, 3:45?
Yeah, the next day I was set to focus pool on some Lufthansa commercial, and the call time for that would be 4:45 or something like that in Musenberg for the sunrise.
Classic Germans wanting to be super early.
Well, we love our magic hour, and that the sunrise is one of those. Hey, so. But that's the thing, is that we do those passion projects regardless. We had no other shot at doing this. So
what happened was that we were luckily at least set up by that stage, and we had a quick powwow. And much to the band's relief, we said, okay, we're not going to be able to do this for too long. We're not going to keep you all night like the previous day where we went until about 2 a.m. We're going to have to wrap by 11 so that Alex can travel back from Stellenbosch and drop everything off and, make sure everything's fine so you can actually, get some sleep and show up on set the next day and be alive. And because of that, particularly with a scene there, what will happen is that we know what we need to get. We've already talked about it at great length. The band just has to, look pretty and play and do their thing, and they sure did. And the main thing is that Alex will go around and we'll get angles of the entire band, singles on everyone, shots of their hands on the instrumentals, like where applicable. And the main thing is that you just went in there like a torpedo, and you get whatever we can, and we get those moments. And thankfully we had 2 people helping us out there who were able to pull focus, which is not always the case. And because of that, we just had like such a great energy from them and from us, and the sort of like, we've got this one chance, we've delayed this twice, we've got to get it done. And that's sort of the fun of it. You end up finding a lot of the magic in those very, crazy...
The fun and dread.
Yeah, the fun and dread.
Yeah, because you have to think on your feet and be creative, on the go. Yeah, it's...
Do you find you guys doing a lot of passion projects?
Not as much as we want to.
But how often would you say, like, in scale to client jobs?
It really depends. Maybe once every 3 months we get to do something together, a passion project, like a music video or something like that. I mean, the goal is to do a lot more of these. The goal is someday to be able to just do narrative projects and maybe a commercial every now and again.
And do you guys do it for creative reasons, just to like feel some creativity or having a way of outlet, or just for like portfolio reasons?
It's a bit for both.
Yeah.
Because it feeds the passion, and if it ends up looking like something we could show to the world and advertise ourselves, it's then.
And then obviously your passion projects are big projects. It's not just go shooting a sunset mission type thing, like us guys.
I mean, it really depends.
Nothing wrong with the sunset.
But it could be though. I mean, we do a lot of those things with our friend Stanley Sabande. Like, I mean, we will, Alex will look at something and say that's pretty cool, and I'll say that's a cool spot, or we'll eye something, and then it'll be great to record, I don't know, music video for him or a live performance.
Yeah, but it's part of like something bigger. Yeah. I mean, for social media, we would just like go and shoot and then just post like a photo or behind the scenes. It's not really for something. I think it's more of like having a creative outlet, I think.
Yeah, I think it's, like you guys were all touching on earlier, like sometimes in the more film directed industry, it's some bigger jobs that last a little bit longer, and then there's a little bit more of a time window between. Whereas for a lot of the social sort of stuff, it's a lot more regular projects, but they're a day-long sort of thing, and it's just volume. So it gets a bit overwhelming, in my opinion, just that barrage of things coming through. You need a bit of a switch off. And
which is what I wanted to go into, because with the social media side of things, you think when you don't have work, you have to force yourself to get more work. Well, with you guys, which I've noticed just from staying with Adam and like viewing you as well, is when you guys don't necessarily have set work to do, it looks like you just do these things instead of like chasing that next client. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, in my experience or the creators around me, it's always like, oh, I have a few weeks open now where I don't have clients or edits, but they always want to fill it with more work. Where I think sometimes it's more important to fill it with like a big project that's more gonna fuel you for the client work.
Look, it really depends. At the end of it really depends on. We all have different ways of using our free time, right? And I think it depends on where you're sitting at, let's say financially. If you really need to get more work, then you'll be on that networking mode and chasing more opportunities or making new connections and things like that. But if you're not necessarily in that position, then you might then want to focus on your own projects and do something a little bit more fun than a random corporate jobs or thing like that. It really depends on on where you are at, I guess, mentally. And
Also, one last thing: a lot of problems on our side of the industry, or a big problem, is getting burnt out. Is that something you guys face as well?
For sure, yeah. I'd say especially in summer during the commercial season, sometimes we have a lot of 12 to 16-hour days back to back. Jobs that last maybe 5 days, and then we jump straight onto the next one, and on it goes, and that's very intense. Of course,
long days as well.
Long days, physically very intense as well, and it's sometimes you get pretty close to a burnout. I think I've been lucky to never come to that. Adam has come pretty close to that, I think.
Yeah, I think when you're working on something longer form, it's maybe, I want to say easier, because with commercial, it almost might as well become long form, because you're hopping on from one to the other with barely a break in between. But from my experience, I think that you can, with everything, if you're not pacing yourself properly and you're kind of diving a little bit too deep into it, and I'm not saying like don't take it seriously, it's just the main thing that you've always got to, pull out at some point and have perspective. You've got to really look at what it is that you're doing. Is it worth sacrificing your health over this one little thing that's actually an ad at the end of the day? Or so you've just got to put it into perspective for yourself. There's people who have no problem throwing themselves deep into an edit, deep into a shoot, and can stay there for months on end. But at some point, you've got to come up to breathe. I think in the case of specifically what you were talking about with how we would, in between, say, paid work, client work, shift to the passion project year, that is because it's not really, like, even though it's not work for us. It's something that we want to do more of. It's something that we are motivated by, and if you could all the time, you would just do that.
Yeah, and there's no burnout, coming at us with that, because we enjoy doing it so much, right?
No pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think definitely, you've just got to take time for yourself, whether that's a morning or a weekend or whatever it is in between. Just, don't get involved in a toxic work relationship. Run very far away.
That's why I'm asking, because I feel like Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, in our side of the industry, it's as if people chase burnout.
It's glamorized.
Yeah, it's glamorized. They're like, I'm editing until like 3 a.m.
It's similar in the film world as well. A lot of people also don't have a choice but hop onto the next gig for fear of losing the next one. Okay, oh wow, I've got to take this job, otherwise my replacement is now going to take
But I think
all
that's
my
out of,
jobs
out of
after
fear.
that.
Like Matt
Yeah.
said, it's more out of glamour, or more out of like the chase of being active or seen as
The
active.
trend of being productive and
Yeah.
active.
Yeah, that's
So like I wake up at 3 a.m. and
Exactly.
I turn on like
Exactly,
3
yeah.
edits by like in half an hour, and
Yeah,
then
and
I
then
go to the gym, and then
and I
straight
red light
afterwards.
my balls, and you know, you know, like that like hustle culture can I think has permeated a lot of what we sort of doing, and I think people are also realizing the importance of catching a bit of a breather here or there and looking after sort of their mental health, and that allows them to perform better when they're actually doing everything else. But like it's part of that, with that romanticized sort of culture of, okay, cool, I'm outworking everyone, so look at me, I'm cool. And also I think exactly what you said, where it's a little bit of a fear of, okay, cool, if I don't say yes to this, or if I'm not doing this, then either the person I recommend is going to be better than I am, and they're going to have that relationship with that person, or, you know, it's you know, because it's not a set, safe 9 to 5 a lot of the time with what we're doing, you're constantly in that what if sort of situation where, okay, cool, what if I can't work for the next 3 months and I said no to this one thing that, you know, and then things can get weird.
Yeah, but it's also like it's definitely a clout thing. I mean, everyone wants to be that guy who's busy and in demand, and there's a satisfaction where like you go and talk to someone and say, oh, like, hey man, like, how was your weekend? And then you know, you can go, oh, I was just on this job the whole time, and it was intense, and it was the whole day, and it was a 16-hour day kind of thing. But man, like at the end of the day, how cool was that? I went home and I started editing straight afterwards because I was so inspired. People go through a phase, I think, where they definitely want to be that person, because it's glamorized, it's idealized, it's this like, you know, godlike content creator just doing things all the time, which is not the case. You've got to live. There's no way around it. And I was definitely in that mindset where like the work that I was doing and the work that I was putting on myself was, you know, it's self-imposed, and that pressure to, you know, constantly be busy working on that thing, improving that thing, and aiming for the next stuff. And it's great to have, and it's a great feeling to have that ambition and that drive, and sort of be motivated in a bit of a twisted way to want to tackle opportunity after opportunity and keep yourself busy. But it's not sustainable. And you've got to find what's sustainable for you, and really just sort of stick to that. You find your routine, and it's experimenting. I mean, I know a few editors in particular who, you know, are never short of work, who can get any job they sort of want because they are highly in demand, very talented, very skilled, and they have now become the kinds of people who recognize that, you know, it's no way to live, it's no way to be creative as well. You will start to just dry yourself out completely for, you know, what used to be your flavor and that sort of freshness that you'd bring to something like an edit is now gone, because you just don't have that time, that the sleep is missing. You don't really get to be your purest self and have that reflect in your work. So I think it's just a double-edged sword. Maybe you'll get more done, but you won't be happy with it down the line.
I like that a lot. And it's refreshing that I think a lot of people are starting to realize that a lot, but it also doesn't take away from the fact that we have to work bloody hard if we want anything to actually, you know, progress and to do new things. You also have to push yourself, and you've got to find where those limits are.
That's the respect I have for your guys' field as well. Like if you're purely in the social media sort of field and churning out that sort of content, like there's a lot of pressure to make it look good every time, and you guys are often working with much less time, because as opposed to, in my case, a lot of the time it's working on a video in 1 or 2 days. It will be split up into multiple versions, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, those sorts of things, and you're reframing. But you will maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll go forward and you have to shoot 12 videos in 1 day or 1 morning with this one person who's there for an hour because they're booked and busy, they're an influencer. What is that like?
Nailed the brief pretty much on the head there. That I think for me is largely, and it comes down a lot to how the actual client is or how the actual person is, and that completely dictates the experience, because there are no extra layers of people there that are involved to kind of either absorb the pressure or to help a vision sort of come to life or to collaborate to bring it to life. A lot of the time it's just one client's opinion and then one creative sort of direction to make that sort of happen, and there can be a bit of a clash of worlds there if those two opinions are a little bit different. If they're in sync, then it's awesome, because then you just work with the constraints that you have and you make a plan. If there are like a simple thing about having to record like so many short format videos in such a short space of time, for me, I found if you've got a person who understands that, okay, cool, we don't have 20 different takes to get this 1 20-second segment, like you either have to know your lines, or you've got to be a bit inventive on the spot. If you're going to suddenly mumble for the first 20 takes, like it's just unrealistic to get through. But then you get other people who just are natural and stuff on camera, and then it's easy. So the short format stuff is so dependent on the exact variables that you're sort of working with, that it can either be a breeze and okay, cool, we just fly through these things, or it's just like, okay, this is just going to be a bit of a disaster and a fix it in post sort of situation.
And it's similar in the film world too, in that regard.
And I think a lot of what you said also had to do with the smaller guys not looking down on anyone, because I've been on the exact same journey, but they do kind of oversaturate the market, because all of these young guys coming in, being able to perform, because there's some skillful guys out there that's able to, like, recently got into the industry, banging out like a ton of videos that looks good for a very cheap price. And then people sometimes, previous clients from mine would have a videographer guy like that, and then all of a sudden they get me who's a bit more budget, or they want just something a bit more professional, and then all of a sudden they expect the exact same turnaround times and deliverables for the same price and all that thing. And I think that's also a big thing, where on our side we have the luxury of calling ourselves businessmen. So we can run the business more or less the way we want to, or say, obviously, like you also mentioned, depends on your own situations. But then you are able to say no to certain clients, or if some client is like, hey, I need this by tomorrow, then you can be like, hey, unfortunately, we don't do like next day deliveries or anything like that. Where I think then people come in that they're like, yeah, but I can do that. And then all of a sudden it's making it more difficult for us guys that focus a bit more on like taking that extra day to give you something high quality instead of quantity.
It's that like undercutting, hey, it's basically someone just sort of chopping you down because they want to squeeze in. And obviously in the long term, that squeezes everyone.
But they don't even know that they're doing that. And I think like when you previously talked about also the differences between like whether we make a difference on your industry, then I was like, you're basically saying we're also oversaturating the market in a sense for you guys. So who might speak then?
I think it's completely right, because I always found myself having I'm gonna say the much smaller up and coming sort of creators perspective of like, why do movie sets need 30 different people on set in the day? That is so silly. And then as you sort of start progressing, you realize why everyone is there to do a very specific job, and all of that comes together to make a vision actually take place. But that's not really something that, unless you have the lens of sort of creation on you from when you were sort of born, that's not something you can learn without actually experiencing it sort of on the day and understanding what it takes to actually make something sort of come to life. And I'm looking down, like you said, there are a lot of up-and-coming sort of creators who now on the short format social sort of jobs where they're going to deliver a lot more than I'm able to now, but also I've chosen to only be able to deliver so much because I want a certain quality level. And now as I'm starting to do some of the bigger jobs as well, I'm very much realizing, okay, cool, I cannot produce something with the same complexity that a lot of the time I'm saying like you guys can sort of do, because I'm just one person a lot of the time, and everything has a very specific function there. And obviously it's a weird sort of position to be in, to now experience sort of both of those worlds sort of colliding. And the whole sort of creative industry is now, it's a weird sort of thing, because I think the line from much bigger production to much smaller production has suddenly had a ladder sort of built between it, and now it stretches all the way from top to bottom. Whereas I think previously, before the advent of like mirrorless cameras and a lot of the technologies that have come up in the last sort of 10, maybe 15 years, it just wasn't anywhere vaguely possible. Like,
and now everyone can be a videographer or a photographer.
Yeah, which means that whole, in my opinion, that whole strata is now just so segmented. Not segmented, just so unsegmented. There's just a layer to everything. So you can be there's movies, and then there's a reel, and there's a way to get to every single thing in between that, and people finding out how to fit in those different brackets is now not causing tension, but it's overlapping a lot, which is
the lines are very blurred now.
Yeah, it's causing a lot of very mixed opinions about a lot of the different things, which is, for me, exciting though. I like it. Like, I think it just it's forcing a lot of the old school industry to adapt in the way that they tell things and find new ways to do that. And it's also allowing the opportunity for people to find their ways into creative industries in all sorts of different ways. And instead of just being forced to go through I imagine a 12 to 15 year career trajectory before you get to doing the types of projects you really want to be doing, because you have to, start as a grip assistant and then
I think that's also part of the problem in the end, especially for our side, not so much your guys' side. I believe, is that because you don't necessarily have to be creative to run a media agency for social media pages. Anyone that can do business can do it. Where I think if you do the traditional route of going through film school, you kind of test it. Where it's like, are you in this for the art or in it for like just the money or the business? Where I think it is quite difficult to be in it for the business if you're not seeing results within like a year or two. But I think I've met a few guys where they haven't done videography or anything, and then they're just good with business. They're not creative, anything. They know it, they say it themselves, and then they just start a media company in like a year or two, pulling in 6 figures a year or something just because they know business, but they don't know creativity. And I think that's also a thing that people want, that professionalism or that business side of things, like, oh, but they have a nice website, instead of actually focusing on, oh, but this guy's actually talented, creative, dedicated, passionate, all these things, which in return just gives you that extra oomph, which I think you don't really get if you're just in it for the business.
Yeah, I think you're always going to get that sort of. I mean, that's happened for all of time. It just depends on the needs of the people you're working for, like the nature of the client. I mean, there are clients. Before any of this was set up, if we just walked into this room, they'd be like, "Whoa, what a sick space! You guys sit on the couch and we'll just film it, and it's great." And you've got like the buzz of whatever, like fluorescent lights in the room and everything, and they don't care. They're like, "Well, you know what? It's the thing. We can post it." That's kind of it. At the end of the day, it depends a lot on efficiency and what matters most to that client. And thankfully, a lot of the time, or hopefully even more, you get to work with clients who do care about presenting something that's maybe a little bit more different, not like the same sort of run of the mill that you'd get on whether it's social media or in film. You have someone who's going to back a vision of that, something that's like, even if it's not entirely unique, just something more creative, a new perspective. And yeah, I think it depends where their priorities lie. And that's kind of what was interesting about what you were saying about why do you need 30 or 300 people on any given day? It's all about that efficiency. I mean, you guys are perfectly capable of taking a presenter or a model and do something amazing with them, doing 20 reels in any given time and pushing that out, and it'll look fantastic. But then suddenly maybe you need that and you need a scene to play out and this narrative thing where you get more and more involved. The locations become much more, the amount of people to manage become much more, and that's where you get all these people to come in when you have the money for it, because you want it to run as efficiently as possible. And that's something that I've marveled at, like being on very few large sets, is when you see the scale and the amount of people involved, it's all about that efficiency of getting to tell that story or just getting it done in the right time. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, where someone might come to you and say, wow, that's like, maybe it's, I've looked at some of the stuff on your page and I thought, damn, like that must take I don't know, a decent amount of time to do. Like, damn, you must have sat there for like a good, like a whole 15 minutes and spent on that thing. And meanwhile, you're like, oh yeah, actually it kind of took 15 hours to get that thing, because we had to be in that spot and really, plan ahead. And, you've got all the pre-prod and all the editing that came into it and the color grading. And, it's a whole thing to arrive at that one point. and people will look at you afterwards like you're insane for spending that much time on something like that to get it to that point. And I think that's kind of it. It's just, it depends on the scale and how big you want to go and how far you want to go. That's kind of that's what interests me, is seeing how that's sort of that's bridged now. You can have a one-man band do something where you bring all these professional elements together and create something that's I watch things on TikTok where I'm like, was this shot on a cinema camera and it's an iPhone 15? Or even something lower range than that. You don't need an iPhone 15. You can make something look fantastic with with a bit of grading and making it pop. So it's interesting to me to see this, because it almost reminds me of when the line between TV and film started getting blurred. We saw that happening a lot towards, like, as the 2010s approached. You can't differentiate. I mean, you watch something on Netflix that's a 10-hour-long series, and it looks like a movie. It's just a longer movie now. And before then, TV was maybe frowned upon. I mean, it's all sitcoms and soapies and melodramas. Now it's, you've got the biggest names in the business who want to be part of these things, from every side, whether it's the actors, the celebrities, whether it's the teams involved, the directors, the producers. And that's really exciting, because that's what this is, this merging of, in short form content, you don't need 5 people to do the job of what is now one person's job anymore. I mean, it's something that's, destabilizing things a bit, and that's interesting, and sort of, I guess, clears a new path. And it's exciting to see how far that will go. It's made things both more difficult for me and also easier for me, especially when you've got run and gun type of shoots. It's like 2 of us running along, and that's it. But then also when it needs to be scaled up, it's scaled up accordingly. So I don't think it's ever going to, it's never going to drive people out of work specifically. It's just something that's that you've got to be creative and find your new niche, essentially. How you're going to work your way around it. Get creative.
Love it. I think it's a lot of this is it's just opening up new ways to do things and new ways for people to fit into different things. It's not really taking away. It's just, okay, cool, there's a whole new category, and there's another new category, another new category. I mean, like the way we're going to have AI impacting everything that we're doing is also going to be just a continual sort of changing of how everything is done. Like, I mean, the podcast sort of thing, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the Modern Wisdom podcast. He recently did a couple of episodes also at those like screen studios.
Yeah, the volume,
yeah. And so amazing. Like, I mean,
yeah, tell me more about that, because I saw that as well, and I was wondering, but why the hell is he doing it? I
think just because he can.
Just
like,
because he could.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I could see, they were doing lighting changes and background changes, and I was thinking, is this because they've scripted the episodes in such a way that they need to be brought in those environments? But I don't know. I
think it was just like a technological sort of first. It was like, okay, cool. This kind of technology has been brought to Hollywood, and it's changed a lot of the way that they do certain things there. Now, one layer down, Chris has always said in a couple of the BTS videos that I've watched that he wants to create some of the most cinematically beautiful podcast episodes that he can.
That's the thing with us.
That's the way to promote it.
Creators is we want to be like you guys in the film industry, but we don't. We just want it to look like that.
Just do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So we find a lot of motivation. I think that's also why the podcast being like hyper cinematic or using the volume. Is that what it's called?
It's a way of calling it. Yeah.
The volume. Is because it makes us feel closer to like Hollywood, even though we know we're not doing that. As long as we get close to it, that's always the goal.
It's fun to play with those toys,
Yeah.
Something like that is so cool. Like, imagine we had endless screens stretching around the back of here, and then as we're sort of talking, if we've got sort of an AI listening device transcribing everything we're sort of going, and one of us starts talking about how I don't want to be weird, but like if we're feeling a little bit depressed and a little bit moody today, and then the whole ambiance sort of shifts, comes a little bit slower.
Language like Depro, on the screen behind us, we have someone popping pills, and there's someone like on the edge of their bed, just head in hands.
Yeah, just things like that. Obviously not so extreme, but like having those environment changes can also be such an interesting way to change the way an experience like this could take place, where your whole ambience could be affected while you're going in real time.
Well, how cool is that? You guys like have your own show like happening here. I mean, that's essentially what it sounds like. Is it Wisdom?
Modern Wisdom is the podcast.
Modern Wisdom. It's like that sounds like better production than a show would be giving. You know, it's something that started, or is a podcast that people are watching on YouTube, I'm guessing.
Yeah, mostly on YouTube there.
Yeah, if it's all posted on YouTube, I mean, where's the bridge there between these game shows that are interactive like that, a talk show and a podcast?
Yeah, it's
how cool is that?
It's crazy cool, and like one of the things I'm really curious to see come out very shortly is the Mr. Beast Amazon production. I don't know if you've heard anything about that. So he's been given a monstrous budget by Amazon. He's producing basically Mr. Beast content, but for the world of TV. And that's going to be, from my perspective, obviously having glorified the whole world of YouTube and that side of content creation, sort of getting excited about it during high school and university and stuff. That's going to be so exciting for me to see, like I'm going to say those, not looked down upon, but like YouTubers are YouTubers. It's its own little sort of niche. It's not film, it's YouTube. And to see that world of YouTube now be elevated to the world of TV is going to be such an exciting thing for me to see. How is that actually done? How does it translate? And is it a different type of experience, or are they kind of going to be the same? So I've got no idea how that's going to pan out, but I'm very excited to see how it does shape up.
Do you guys, sorry, this is a bit different topic, but do you guys as industry frown a lot upon people that started from like YouTube or social media? Because I know Freddie Wong and Corridor Digital speak about it a lot, that they struggle finding people taking them serious to get like serious scripts or gigs just because they are seen as YouTube creators.
That's actually a good topic to jump on, because there are a lot of gatekeepers in this industry. It's a very guarded space, because it's so overly saturated. And everyone wants to keep their jobs. Everyone wants to be the one who continues to be in whatever position they are in. And if you've got an outsider who's coming from a different background and suddenly becoming a bit more of a star, right? Yeah. And you look at them as this new kid on the block who's suddenly becoming a bit more attractive than you, then they look upon that as a threat, right? So that's why there's that type of attitude, I guess. And like we spoke earlier, there's a lot of egos in this industry as well. And I think that's what people get very touchy about. I like on my end, and I do, hear and, witness some of that gossip and that judgmental type of attitude every now and again of people talking about, other creators of different backgrounds, with such, let's say, judgment or approach. But it really depends on the people, equally, there'll be other people who are like, wow, this is actually really cool to see those two worlds kind of being merged, or seeing someone from the YouTube world want to expand their horizons and tap into the world of cinema. No, but yeah, no, I mean, I don't see the point of judging someone because of that.
You think it's a lot to do with them not walking the traditional route?
Yes, especially in our Cape Town, South African, especially in South Africa, in Cape Town, it's very hierarchy based. You'll have you need to
start.
You have to start at the bottom, and you have to work your way up and do your time. 5 years is this, and then 5 years is that.
What is the typical sort of progression?
I mean, it really depends. Are we talking about director of photography route?
Yeah, like DOP going.
Yeah,
going
okay.
Outside, where do you have to sort of start?
Okay, so you've got three different avenues that you could explore in the, let's say, on those traditional bases, as being a grip, being a light, being in lighting, or being in camera. Being a grip, not so much, because it's such a technical labor type of job that you never really ascend to being a creative. So that's not really an ideal way to start if you want to be a DOP. Then you've got lighting, which is a great way to approach on how to learn lighting on a practical basis. You learn how to be an electrician. You learn, all the lighting techniques out there, and you start as a spark. So that means it's purely physical labor type of thing, setting up lights, running cables, and rigging and all that stuff. Then you become a bass boy, lighting, and that's basically pretty much your second in command to the gaffer, who's the chief lighting technician. So as a bass boy, you kind of run the team and you delegate for the gaffer, and you do the more you have a bit more responsibility, making sure that you've got all the gear needed for the job and that everything is maintained properly and that your team is running smoothly, etc. Obviously, it depends on the scale of the job. Then you've got the gaffer, who's chief lighting technician, who's works closely with the DOP on how to achieve the desired mood in terms of lighting and executing it practically. Choosing the most efficient but also the cheapest way of achieving a certain lighting look / setup, and who runs all the lighting, the lighting team. And
I think a good gaffer is so underrated.
Yeah, for sure. And to become a gaffer could take you 5 years, could take you 10, 15 years. It really depends on how good you are at being a learner, how good are you at learning those things, and then also forging relationships with DOPs who then will hire you as such as a gaffer. And then after being a gaffer for a couple of years, you could maybe potentially, become a DOP. But I feel like the third route, which is the camera route, is probably the most popular and the most effective route at becoming a director of photography. Very much like in the lighting world, you start as a trainee or and then as a loader, as a second AC. You can be doing that for a couple of years, working under a focus puller and learning, how to pretty much, run the camera department and understand all the gear that is available out there, understanding lenses, cameras, everything, and pretty much maintaining all those. A camera. Look at it like a race car that needs to be constantly changed between, let's say, a rally setup to suddenly an F1 setup, and then going to NASCAR setup, but all within the same day. Everything needs to be changing constantly. Parts have to be changed, maintained. You've got to make sure everything is running smoothly. There's so many little aspects that normal people have no idea about, right? Those are little small things then you learn as a technician. And then if you don't get lost in that world and if you maintain a trajectory into becoming a director.
I like that phrasing, don't get lost along the way.
Well, because a lot of people get stuck in that position and being known entirely just as a technician, as a camera assistant, and they get comfortable. It makes sense, earn a decent pay, you get a consistent amount of work, and you sort of like your job enough that you don't really want to change. A lot of the time, stepping up from being a second AC to a first AC, suddenly you find yourself in a black hole of no work because everyone has known you for many years as a loader. And now you've got to start establishing relationships with DOPs who already have 10 focus pullers that they could call. And suddenly here's this new guy that says that he can do a good enough job, if not a better job, but you're kind of skeptical. So it's always difficult to work your way up the ladder. It takes time. So once you become a first AC focus puller, then it can take another 5 years, maybe more, before you become an actual camera operator. And then if you're lucky after being a camera operator, or if you like to branch out as a Steadicam operator, or a gimbal operator, you could do that and being a camera operator, that's the best job in the world, really. There's not much more to say about that. It's
your eyes glinting now.
It's so much fun. You don't have the annoying responsibilities of changing a battery or changing a card or changing a filter or changing a lens. You're purely working with the director and the DOP in how to, lens a film. And it's a lot of fun because now you finally get to be creative. When you're a second AC, a focus puller, and when you're in lighting, a Spark, a bass boy, you don't get to be creative at all. You're just a cog or wheel in that bigger machine. And once you, let's say a camera operator, suddenly you have a say in how to start telling the story. And then jumping back on that
People
train.
listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, exactly. And then jumping back on that train of, then maybe if you're lucky, while you're a camera operator, you can start being hired as, let's say, a second unit DOP. That's usually on the bigger films, if they have stunts, if they have things that don't really involve the big name actors. Those are usually taken care of by the second unit. They do a lot of the either the fun stuff, which is, like I said, the stunts, or the visual effects plates and things like that. Then you can be like a second unit DP for a while if you're lucky, or you can be called upon for smaller DOP projects. And then eventually, if you're lucky, then you can work as a full-time DOP, eventually be recognized as such. But that really depends on you and how good you are at establishing and maintaining relationships with directors and producers, who will then trust you in with their visions. And
I was going to ask about like establishing those relationships with those types of people. Like you say, it's so integral, and like you said, the types of relationships you have from one strut of the ladder to the next is a very different. You've got to have relationships with different people, because it's the different people pulling in. It's not the director pulling in every single person on the crew. It's, you got to know this person who knows this person who knows this person. Do you view sort of the relationship side versus the proof of work side and show reels and stuff as kind of simultaneous, and they have to kind of exist together, or is it very much skewed to one side or the other for you?
It really depends. Some people get hired because they have a great showreel, and some people get hired because they have a great personality. It really depends. Like there's no set rule,
For yourself, what have you found to be sort of?
For me, it's been a mix of both. I find that having a showreel has definitely helped prove that I can do a certain, I can hold up to a certain standard. But it's very important to have the connections, have the relationships, have the people who will vouch for you and say, this guy can do it. And that's equally important.
100%. I think the word of mouth thing is so powerful. I think we were discussing it the last time about how, in the world of freelancing, how different people get work in different domains, and it really comes down to that a lot.
Yeah, I also figured that with word of mouth, in my experience, are the clients that stays, or the word of mouth clients that came from a recommendation or a suggestion, while the ones that just stumble upon my portfolio, even though the ones that's here because of a recommendation never even asked to look at my portfolio. They're just like, oh, we saw you did like one video for our friend, now we want you to do it again. But with people, they like view your portfolio like, oh, it's very good, but we're going to go with someone else. So it is. It's
an interesting one, because that's what I've found for myself, actually. It's either I've made reels before and like I've sent them to a few people, but at the end of the day, what happens is that it usually ends up being from other people just finding me on Instagram, from the few posts that I have, or word of mouth, and it sticks, because then they're like, it's that trust thing. If someone that you trust, trust this person, you're gonna go with them every time if they've done a good job for you.
Yeah, and you as a director, obviously you don't really shoot, so you can't really have like a reel where you can show everything unless you've actually been directing a gig. Do you find it more challenging to get gigs compared to like Alex, that actually has, like, he can go out and shoot anything like a spec ad or something on his own and still use that to promote him? Do you find it more challenging, or how do you actually also how do you manage to climb up the ladder?
It's a bit different for me, because I obviously just don't market myself in that way at all, because I don't shoot. I wouldn't. I'm not your guy to go.
How do you market
pick up
yourself
that thing?
then?
The way that I market myself is that I will bring the conceptualization. I'll bring through the ideas, no matter how many it really takes to get to what you're trying to communicate across, and work with everyone involved on the project to get it to that one streamlined vision. So it's coming in, working closely with the producer on the project, or whoever's sort of playing that sort of overseeing role, whether it's for an agency, a production company, the client themselves, working together with them and making sure you can get that aligned and communicate the idea that they want at the end of the day. That's more where my skill lies. And then I know the right people to then get in touch with, depending on the budget, how many it will be decided. And then you assemble your team and set out to achieve what you've essentially promised at the end of the day, what you've pitched. That's where it comes through. That's more or less what's happened for me, and my way of getting to that is more through through production, really. So whether that's mostly just been working for various production companies where applicable on those sorts of projects. It's about, getting a brief, or even, not getting a brief, getting almost a sentence of what the client might want or what someone might want, and interpreting that, pitching it back to them, and getting it to a point where it makes sense. You're almost like, you're just sort of the expert in communicating in a way that makes sense to them. You want to relay it in a way that they want to hear it as well. So that's where it would be for me. I don't, in terms of shooting, that's very much not my thing. I could do something probably very basic, but not anything impressive.
Yeah. So most of your, you said you part-time working for a production company, right?
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah. So you find it difficult to use. I'm assuming you're not allowed to use those gigs as to promote as your own, like on a profile or something, or on your personal website if you're like searching for a new gig. I'm assuming you can't use those. So how, if you, like Alex, shoot something, how do you use that specific item to get more clients? Do you guys do it as boosted ads, or just as like wait for someone to spot it? Like, how do you like sell yourself?
I still do assemble reels for myself. The main thing is that you're showing off a different thing. You're not showing off, in my reel, I'm specifically saying this is for like a directing, writing, or just purely directing, or directing and editing. Sometimes I'll fuse it. I do a bit of motion graphic stuff as well, so that will often go hand in hand and be like, oh, cool, if you get me on this one thing, I can also do that. So it's about packaging it in that way, making sure that I'm not just essentially doing one thing, the same way that you guys are also doing everything top to bottom. But where it comes in is that I'm more sort of showing a storytelling perspective of it. I'm showing the brands I've worked with. It's more about the showing, hey, these are the people who have trusted me to tell a story alongside them, even tell their story. It's more showing that you know how to compose a scene or a shot, knowing like where your skill comes in there, where it's applicable to do, something that's more efficient in a corporate setting versus more indulgent in a passion project, or more like narrative-based sort of setting. It's showing that you can adapt to both sides. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So whereas someone would be looking at your reels like for both storytelling and actually the quality of what you're shooting, mine's more towards the storytelling side. Yeah.
I think it's hard to grasp for me, because for me it's just whether I directed the video most of the time when I had someone just shooting, which has happened before, or I'm shooting and directing and doing everything on my own. They just look at the video and whatever vibe they get from the video, or if it looks cool, then they book you. Well, with you guys, you mentioned you had to state, no, this is for a director, so look at the shots different than just, oh, it's a nice shot. But do you guys find a lot where obviously you guys work together, so, first question actually is, have you ever, I don't know the English word for it, bots, like bumped heads a bit, to a point where it's like the two of you?
Oh, yeah.
That's the first question. The other one is with other people that's shooting together, also a combo like you guys. Have you heard of stories or experienced it in yourselves where it's like there's confusion between the DOP and the director as to who actually created the shot or created the visuals? Because I think in a case, obviously you guys are very professional, just hearing you two talk. But I think in cases where it might not be, the people not be as professional, do you think they steal a lot, trying to take credit for something the director did, or vice versa?
So to answer the first question, where if we've ever butted heads, well, let's actually bring the shallow graves thing in there. So there was one instance where we sort of had a bit of a disagreement on how to execute a certain sequence.
Yeah.
Look, it wasn't very dramatic, but it was just a little bit...
We need to have the screen tone shift quickly. Tension.
Yeah, there you go.
It's all blue now. It's sad.
But look, it wasn't that dramatic. The reason why it was a bit tricky is because it was a very late hour of the night. So we were on our last sequence, so we wanted to shoot for that day. But it was also a very crucial sequence, and it required a lot of visual effects. For reference, I mean, if anyone has seen it, it's that tunnel sequence where we go from member to member, camera tracking backwards through this tunnel, and it's pretty much a sequence of 4 separate shots stitched together, and we thought we were in agreement on how to execute it when we were planning everything and making shot lists and pre-visualizing everything, but when it came to actually shooting it, then we suddenly realized that we were actually not on the same page on how we were meant to pull this off. I thought we were meant to do it a certain way, and Adam thought it was a different way. And so
Yeah. So just to clarify, the clash was how to execute the idea. It wasn't that we were like fighting over no, like it's 2 a.m, like we can't do this, like no, this is what I wanted kind of thing. It was more just, it was the best way, especially because you're also working with, I mean, we're used to staying up at random hours to get this done. You've gone through the motions, but when you're working with the band as well, it's like, got jobs the next day as well. You don't want to keep them waiting for too much longer. And so it came down to a crux of, we wanted to wrap up for their sake. Everyone's getting a bit tired. We had a lot where we wanted to get done at that particular location, but the thing was that everyone's getting a bit tired. Everyone's losing their wits a bit, and that was when we were sort of getting ready to pack down. And Alex rightly said, let's at least do this one sequence, which is this one. And the main thing there was, I had gone to Alex and I said, I really want to do this thing where on each beat, we have each instrumentalist appear in frame as we track back in one solid thing to achieve that, and they all step into frame. My idea was much more complicated to do that, which was to, have Alex do one long track back every time, and then also try and do it with each person, each of the band members, factoring in within that same shot. Where you came in though, you can explain what you did, where you actually segmented it.
Yeah, I wanted to separate it into 4 shots.
Yeah.
But to sum it up, it wasn't a creative disagreement where we butted heads into, I want it to look like this, no, I want it to look like this. It was more a practical sort of argument. Yeah. I find that because Adam and I know each other so well, we don't really butt heads in terms of overstepping our boundaries. For example, me overstepping my boundaries as a director of photography and him as a director. Like, I know my place.
Yeah,
I know that.
You're a bad example to ask this question to, because you guys work so well together and very professional. I think, like in this case, I think both of you know, like, okay, let's keep it professional and not get personal. So I think.
But it's also one of those things that I'd say, I think the reason why we don't have too many like creative clashes on set is because you kind of get those out the way if you're planning properly.
Yes.
Like, we will sit down and Alex will say, like, I want to get this shot, and I'm like, maybe this way, and then I'll come to him and say, let's get this impossible thing, and he'll go, that's stupid. Yeah. There's got to be a better way, kind of stuff, and we'll sit and work it out then and there, and it's all done in like a proper, still professional way. But that's the place for us to like properly hammer it out. We're not just showing up at the location and saying, oh, but actually, and then that's where I think things will start getting a bit messy, because then you're sort of going back on your word or going against what you've said, being indecisive for no reason, that sort of thing. So I think that's it. It's so we don't really have a lot of those headbutt things. It might be like one or two, like I'd call them disagreements, but that's more just like a, you know, and then we get on with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the key, especially for me as a DOP, is to understand, you know, and remember my place. You know, at the end of the day, I'm here to execute the director's vision, and I can, you know, give some inputs and suggestions and ideas. I can bring those to the table, but I can't be very precious with them. At the end of the day, it's not my call to make. I can, you know, say as much as I want, and I can either recommend or warn a director about certain things as much as I want, but at the end of the day, it's not my call. As long as I accept that and I make peace with that, then I rarely butt heads with a director, unless I become very precious about an idea and I feel like a director is completely messing it up. If they lack vision, or if they lack initiative, or if they're not very good at communicating with their actors, or if I feel like they're going in a direction that is just absolutely silly, then I will either try to step in and rescue the project, in, let's say, from my perspective. But if I feel like it's you've got to choose your battles, and if I feel like it's a battle that is not worth fighting for, it's best to step away from the whole thing. Try not to get attached to it, because that's also a bit of a dangerous path. If you get very, very attached to a certain project or a certain idea, that's when things can start falling apart.
Yeah, no, I get you, because I also see that it's not, you guys see that it's not your project. You're just a helping hand necessarily, or you're obviously playing.
Depends on your position in it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I mean, obviously on the project, the music videos you guys make, it's you're just as important, and you're just as important. So of course, I understand that. I'm just more in the industry now. I lost my train of thought.
Another
That's
project I saw you two work on together when I was doing my social media stalk. You guys did a Fitch and Leeds, I think it was called Show Greatness commercial that you guys
Yes.
did together. When was that?
So that was actually for it was a competition for creating an ad in order to sort of showcase like their whole range, and that was something that I, you know, threw my hat in to see how far it went, and fortunately we got in, and that was a really, really fun one to work on.
It was 2018 or 2019?
It was 2019, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's a while back.
Yeah,
I thought it was a bit more
okay,
recent.
long time ago.
Yeah. The that was a really fun thing to do. Like if I could make more of those, if I could make one of those every day, I totally would. It was just so much fun. It was great as well because I think we both got to you know, sort of play a bit more as well, and sort of really show off what we can do with just a bit of a budget. I mean, that was quite a small budget project because they give you something to work with. And then also there's the sort of prize at the end of the day, which we were fortunate enough to grab at the end of it. The main thing was is that I don't get enough opportunities to work with the actors that I love and just work with people in that way, and that's my greatest joy, is directing actors. And Alex also came to the space and from locations to just picking up everything to make it look, you know, more grand and really just epic. We managed to squeeze out quite a lot of our locations out of the talent we had involved, and I think that everyone was just having fun on that shoot as well. And that's what the kind of dream is to be working your hardest and be putting in all that effort, but you're just, you know, you're getting along at the end of the day, and it just feels right. And that was a fun 2-day shoot. I don't think it was yeah. It was 2.5, yes. A 2.5 day shoot, and yeah, it was just it was a good time.
It came together so nicely. The shot that really stood out to me, I think, was actually the first one with all those light beams sort of coming through the window, and like each beam was like so perfectly sort of crafted and stuff. And you also saw the whole sort of window, and I've got no idea how you managed to hide all the lights. I really want to ask.
We were very lucky. It was all the sun.
Was that all the sun?
Yeah, it was not planned. We had a light out there which did absolutely nothing, and suddenly the sun came out, and you know, we had some atmos, some smoke in the room, and the sun was just there at the right time, and just long enough for us to do just a few shots, and afterwards, obviously, then it went behind the tree or it went too high, but that was just sheer luck.
One of those things that pops up on the day, I guess, but it just looked incredible.
It was pure magic. We were doing that specific take quite a few times, and it was because as the sun was rising, it got better and better and better. And
just one more.
yeah, and Filmmaking Lui, who was producing and ADing that shoot as well, he's someone who's like he's very strict, and he keeps us tightly on schedule. Like, he's really fantastic. But even he was looking at it and going, "Yeah, no, we don't really have a lot of time here, but just keep doing that." It was wonderful, and that's the kind of thing we just had. We had so much magic happening, which was awesome.
No, amazing stuff. And I saw later on you obviously progressed to a couple of different Cape Town locations and ended one of the Cape Town beaches and stuff as well. How, I'm not going to say lucky, but like I grew up in Joburg, so moved down here, and then I've always found Cape Town just so amazing. Like, how integral is Cape Town's environment to structuring so many of the shoots that are able to happen here because of the variety everywhere? I think I don't know if it's like this anywhere else, or like across the rest of the world or anything like that, but it feels like you can shoot in most types of environments here pretty easily.
I mean, that's why we've got a big industry, eh?
Do you think that's what like keeps it really alive?
It's one of the main reasons, because we can throw in almost any type of environment within a 200-kilometer radius, and so that's why. Yeah.
Have you found that anywhere else? I don't know if you've traveled abroad.
Yeah. You can do the same in, say, Portugal, for example. Of all places. I can mention those places just because I know that they are our, let's say, our competitors, so to speak. You know, if international companies aren't coming down to shoot a commercial in Cape Town, it's because they'll have found a way to do it in a place like Portugal, or maybe somewhere in South America. And or there are other places like Hungary, of all places, Bulgaria.
I wouldn't have thought the weather would be perfect there. But
well, I guess that's for maybe more urban types of shoots or studio types of shoots.
Yes.
It's Cape Town has a lot to offer.
How do South Africans' rates compare to sort of the rest of the world? Are we kind of undercutting the market a little bit, or is it kind of
this is
becoming a bit more
it's another
globalized?
reason why we've got a lot happening here, is because we have a cheap labor. Yeah.
No unions.
Are there unions in other places for
Yeah.
filming? Really?
Yeah.
Where do they have unions?
In the US, quite a bit.
Time to move.
It's very unionized. I'm not too sure how things work in Europe exactly. If they don't have unions, well, they have tight laws, that protect crew, and,
You're mentioning like 16-hour days sometimes are a bit of the norm. I imagine things are in place, other places, to try and, I'm not going to say make things reasonable, but make things a bit more reasonable.
Yeah, work conditions are certainly a bit more acceptable in places like the US and Europe. Sure, you still get very tough, long days, but not as much as you do here, yeah.
I was at one of the Sony events the other day, and I was chatting to a guy, and I can't remember which way around it was. I'm hoping you guys can clarify without throwing all South Africans under the bus or in the bus. And he was saying it was either the South Africans that were super lazy, or some international European crew that was super lazy. I'm not sure which way it is. In your experience working with any sort of internationals, is there a big difference in culture and attitudes towards things?
Yes, there's but it really depends.
Sorry, I'm baiting you to name and shame here.
No, like I'm trying to find examples for you. There will be some. Let's say that the production companies that don't know Cape Town or South Africa very well will then approach it with a bit of a skeptical eye. A lot of production companies or even heads of departments will bring their own crew with a lot of the time, because they trust them, it makes sense, and because they're not sure that we can provide that same quality of service. However, we can. We've got a very, very solid industry. Our people really know what they're doing, and we get that feedback a lot from international crews that come down here, that we are indeed at the same level as the international crew. That's for sure. If not, a lot of the time they will actually praise us for actually being a little more active, being going the extra mile as well, while having the same amount of knowledge as your American or your UK crew member. But it always comes down to also your method of working. You know, sometimes we have to adapt ourselves to, let's say, the UK work mode or the US work mode, depending on whether it's where the production is coming from. We have a lot of international series and movies that are shot down here, and sometimes, you do have to adapt yourselves to how a certain company or how a certain director or director of photography will be working. But I guess we're quite adaptable at that. Yeah.
Nice to know. Have either of you traveled abroad for like extended periods, working with different international crews as well?
I was fortunate enough to travel to Italy twice for a sports brand type of commercial.
Was that a different experience, sort of going there and working in there?
Yeah, it was a different, a little bit different. Working with Italian crew, all Italian crew with like a basic level of English
Do you
understanding.
need a translator on set? Or
No, it's actually fine because I found that we have a bit of a universal language going on. We all understand how the equipment works and what we're needing. So a lot of the time, maybe there's a bit of a language barrier when it comes to having a normal conversation, but when it comes to working, it's easy to kind of give certain direction. However, it is a bit difficult to plan ahead. Let's say requesting specific type of equipment, or like sometimes things do get lost in translation, and you don't find yourself as prepared as you'd want to be. And also, they have just a different way of working. They might be a bit slower, or they might approach a way of doing things that is a bit different. But at the end of the day, you just got to be prepared for those little hurdles and adapt the best you can.
Equipment is something that fascinates me, mostly because I keep spending all my money on buying stuff. But I've seen from your socials, in particular, Alex, you've had some monster camera setups that you've operated before, and like obviously I understand sort of the world of small Sony mirrorless sort of cameras, and I'm saying my upper threshold is probably going to be something like an FX6. I'm like, if I have a Burnout or an Arri or something, like it's just wasted because I can't operate the thing solo, and like it wouldn't suit my purpose whatsoever. But obviously in the world of I'm gonna say bigger film formats, it's obviously that type of stuff is required. Is there a massive difference for you? Do you have big preferences? What have you found to be like really exciting to work with versus like, okay, it's just there because the budget's there, but it's not actually sort of needed to tell the story? And Adam, from your perspective from a director sort of viewpoint, does the gear matter? Do you care, or do you just want your DOPs to be able to produce your vision however they sort of see fit?
Yeah, that's a cool topic. I must say I've always enjoyed the bigger sets more, with more equipment and also the bigger type of equipment. Maybe that's because I love the big machine aspect of it, not just the camera, but the whole set of having a lot of people that are very good at a very specific job, and that ensures a great execution along the board of achieving a good, let's say, end result. But coming back to the gear, I love working with bigger cameras for sure. It's just I find it a lot more. There's something about, and I guess that's because I grew up, watching a lot of behind the scenes maybe, or watching a lot of movies where I'm like, I don't know, there's something about holding a bigger camera on your shoulder, and
That's part of the fun.
yeah, I don't know. And look, yes, the gap is closing between smaller cameras and bigger cameras, but it's not just about that. There's your lenses, there's your lighting, every little thing matters, and when you bring all those things into account, it actually makes a big difference. Sure, it doesn't come down to the gear. It comes down to how how well you use it, and if the project calls for that, right? If A, it has the budget for it, and if B, if it's worth it, I'm not going to hire a techno crane for a shot that doesn't need it, for example. What's the point? You've got to make sure that it calls for it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know I'm circling around the
Yes, yeah.
yeah, I know I'm circling around that question a lot. Working with bigger gear also brings a lot of limitations. When you have a bigger camera, it's much harder to put it on a stable head or a stabilizer, or to pull off very quick and spontaneous shot, because you have to reconfigure everything to make it work for a specific shot. But that's why it works very well for sets that have for shoots that I've prepared a lot and done a lot of planning and scheduling to work out when and how to execute a shot. So that's where that type of equipment comes in handy. If you're going to be doing something that's a bit more spontaneous, where you need to be on your feet and be able to adapt very quickly, well, that's when a Burnout or something like FX3 or FX6 will come in super handy. Doing a documentary shoot, you need a camera that will be able to switch settings very, very quickly, and that works best. But if you're working on a movie where you're going to be doing a very specific move from point A to point B, and you're doing that for the next 2 hours, that means you can really throw in all, let's say, all the resources into that, and only that, and make sure that the camera performs at its best to develop the best picture in only that regard, right? You can't throw a camera from a tripod to a Steadicam shot in 2 minutes. That's impossible. I mean, sure, some people will be able to do it, but that's the thing. You've got to understand that if you're going to be using bigger equipment, you got to be, and that's when we come back to being decisive, right? You've got to.
It's a lot harder to change your decision after.
Yeah, exactly. If you've made a decision and you want to make that shot on the dolly, it's going to be on the dolly. It's not going to be thrown on your shoulder or something. I don't know.
I remembered one, because I only worked on like these big sets twice in my life. Once was just, I can't remember how, and the one time I believe was with you. And also the one, on the one specifically, they also started off with a slider or something, like a very big slider, and then they were like, no, this is not going to work, let's put in a tripod instead. And then them having to set up the slider, it's not just a slider, it's those tracks, those dolly tracks. So it's a big thing, like everything has to be set up, like 5 people working on it, and then just to be like, oh, no, it's not actually going to work, let's take it out. It took so much longer than, well, they were quick, but to think it's such a big process to do it.
Imagine you're one person there, like it's impossible.
Yeah.
Like you can't
Maybe
do
just
that.
2.
That's the thing, is that with bigger gear comes a lot more crew, and that's something you have to bear in mind. As much as I love working with big equipment, you've always got to factor in mind all the responsibilities that come with that, and all the limitations and hurdles that come with that. So it really depends on the project. I might love bigger cameras, but at the end of the day, if the project calls for something that's light, something that's adaptable, then you've got to use the small equipment and make the best out of a situation. It really comes down to that. You can't favor one way of doing things.
I like it. Adam, do you care, or do you just want DOPs to be happy?
No, it's not about that. I mean, my thing is that I love, and this is something I can't really do very often because of time restraints, and just the nature of a job is that I love being a perfectionist about things and doing something right over and over and over and over again until it is sort of like as close to perfect as it can be. And the thing with that is that, as Alex has said, you want the best stuff there. You want the sort of almost heavier gear to make sure that you get almost the steadiest thing. You want, something that is refined and specialized specifically for that reason. Whereas most of the time, that's not the reality, especially for most of the work I do, like most of the paid work I do is very run and gun. And I'm often, sitting at a list that I've gotten a quote for, and it's my ideal list. It's not a dream list, but it's something where it's like, wow, look at that. That's that's going to make something pretty nice. Like, look at what we've got on there. I mean, we've filled it with like 16 tubes, not really, but like just anything that could, make life a little bit easier for what we're doing. And a lot of that has to be sort of whittled down to the absolute basics. And the sort of point that I work towards is, unfortunately, going to the DOP and being like, okay, cool, what can I not take away from this? And we can still make it look this way. Like, we won't lose quality. We can still work around if we, do it a little bit of a wang-jangled way. And so it's more about just getting creative with it and making sure that you keep what is absolutely needed. But for bigger projects, I think I would allow myself to, dive deeper into the specific look, the specific lenses, thinking of having, tracking shots and those sorts of things where you can have a dolly involved. That is absolutely ideal. And that's where I want to be. But the main thing is, you have to be on a project that is of that size, I think. Yeah.
Does gear matter?
Yes.
So that's the question they always is for us creators. Does gear matter? Because you have someone shooting on a phone and someone shooting on this and someone shooting on a Komodo Red and like all these things, but then just for the end of the day for it to show up on social media. I considered buying the Blackmagic Pocket 6K like 20 times, but every time I'm like, what am I currently creating? Where I think in the film industry, also something I got from you is it adds to that motivation. Like seeing that you're shooting with a high budget like equipment and a cool cam, it just adds to that, like that feeling like seeing a Ferrari drive by. It just makes you feel good. But with that being said, do you think gear actually makes a difference? Because there's also this one, I can't remember which horror movie it was, I think it was Scream or something. They shot everything on an iPhone, like an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 8 or something, like some time ago. And it actually got, I think they spent like $10,000 or something on the budget, but then they got like a few millions from it. So then there's also that, but then a lot of people would say don't look like at that because it's
Wasn't it also one of the Paranormal Activity?
Yeah, Paranormal Activity.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't know if it was on a phone, but it was on like a Handycam or something.
It was a phone, and then they just added like some stuff to like make it so you can hold it with both hands, but it was just a phone.
Steven Soderbergh's also done a few experiments where I think he shot a horror film, sort of this asylum-based one. I can't remember the name, but that was also done entirely on an iPhone. I mean, obviously you have the plugins and everything to get it to that stage, but yeah, people do manage quite amazing things with the limited resources they have, and it becomes like a gimmick, and it becomes a gimmick that you can sell your film with or sell what you're making. I mean, there's the movie Tangerine, which went on to be sort of a festival darling. It sort of swept and was received super well. And the guy who directed that, Sean Baker, has just won the Palme d'Or at Cannes for his latest movie. Sorry for pronunciation. But that's the kind of thing, is that it's definitely a means of getting you to where you'd want to be. But at the end of the day, it definitely matters. Like to make exactly what you want to see, it definitely matters. And I'm not saying that you can't make exceptional stuff. I mean, there are loads of YouTubers that I look to, and I know that they're just doing it, like they probably have their tripod on a skateboard, and that's how they film themselves doing something. There's a guy called Gawx, Gawx, and his stuff looks supreme. And it's down to his color grading and the way he's shot it, and he definitely knows what he's doing, and his editing is fantastic. He's not using these crazy massive setups, and he's making it look insanely cinematic. It looks like a music video, most of his things, like better than music videos. But to get it to that sort of that tip top, to get it to the cream of the crop, you definitely need the right stuff.
And you think if someone like that YouTuber you mentioned, that because I follow a lot of we talked earlier, YouTube was our university, so that's where we learned most of our things. It's just following these guys sitting in their living room, making these setups and trying to recreate that. But do you think that, let's say someone like me or Matt, want to jump over into your side of the industry, do you think we'll also be forced to start from the bottom, or do you think the skills that we have built up over the last 6 to 10 years will definitely make an impact where people can just see like, oh, well, he knows more than someone who just came out of university?
Depends. What would you want to do?
I don't know, let's just anything let's say directing.
You would want to be a director.
Yeah, let's say I want to go into the directing side of things. But me being like, I have worked with large brands where obviously have directed large crews and people, but it's not seen as directing because it's more like you're the one-man band running.
Well, you wouldn't be in actually a very bad position of doing so, because I've seen a lot of photographers, for example, who are then thrust into a directing position on commercials. They've never directed it before in their lives, but here they are directing a commercial. And sure, you can see that they're still new to it. You know, there's certain aspects of directing and filmmaking that they're not really familiar with. But if they've surrounded themselves with professionals who can, teach them the ropes along the way, then everything sort of falls into place. And how to get yourself there, I would say, again, it really comes down to your relationship with those clients and with those agencies. That's really the only thing. Otherwise, yeah, the other route is to, like you said, start from the bottom and, go to production companies and be like, hey, are you guys looking for PAs? I'm happy to do anything on set. It's very two different ways of approaching things. But if you already have experience in content creation, and if you already have a relationship with certain brands or agencies, and you tell them, look, there's this bigger idea I've got, and you pitch them something that they really like, and if they trust that you can pull it off as a director, then that could be your way in, Okay.
So would you say that's like a different method to getting into than just, okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many ways of getting into the industry. There's no set rule.
But the main, biggest one is the traditional of starting.
Maybe not really anymore. Hey, things have changed a lot. It also depends on which side of the industry you want to end up in. If you want to be in the film world where they just make movies, then yeah, unfortunately, it's the traditional way of climbing up the ladder is the better way, still. But if we are in the commercial side of things, things are a lot more flexible.
And then the same question that I had as before. The same question as I had as before. Let's say someone like me or Matt want to go to the film side, like the narrative film side of things. You think it's going to be much more difficult, or also going to be easier since we have a little bit of experience?
The thing is that thanks to your guys' knowledge in the equipment and the fact that you have equipment that is available to you guys could start creating short films and things like that and make smaller scale type of projects that don't need too much funding. But if we're looking at big scale productions, that's where it can get very tricky. Yeah. And that's where there's a lot of gatekeepers and people who it's also very hard to find funding for these things in South Africa. It can take a long time. Yeah.
Either way, we're progressing, we're learning, we're doing new and exciting things, and I think that's a nice segue to lead to how I wanted to sort of almost wrap up, in that I've got immense respect for the types of work that you guys are doing. Looking at what you're producing is so inspiring and very exciting to see, and likewise with the work that you're producing now, I think I'm looking at some of the mad transitions and I don't know how to do them, so it's also more inspiring for me. What I'd like to kind of maybe wrap up with is just kind of where to next, what's the dream, and 10, 15 years time, what are we looking at for each of your futures if all goes to plan?
Well, my end goal is to end up still telling stories, but on a much bigger scale. I really want to be, in the next 15 years, hopefully, in a position where I'm directing feature films or narrative series as well, whether that's a mini-series or a show. That's where I want to be. I've fixed my eye on commercials for quite a time, but it's not entirely where my heart is at. At the end of the day, I want to be able to basically, kind of what I said very similar to what I said at the beginning of the interview, is that I just want to get what's in my head onto the screen and sort of share that with people, give them that experience that you spoke about, whether it's laughing, crying together. It's a huge thing. It's larger than life to me, and that's the only way forward, really. So I'll be here continuing to write and direct, and the main thing is I just want to live in that world. I just want to live in this space where you're constantly sharing stories, and that's what it's about for me. Yeah,
Beautiful.
simple as.
Today I find myself being a DOP on a few small projects, which is great. I'm happy to be there, but I find myself still focus pulling a lot on bigger productions. But in 10, 15 years, I would like to be working full-time as a DOP, preferably on feature films or TV series. As much as the commercial world can be fun, where you can experiment a lot, you can be creative, and having a short project can be also great because you're not too focused on the same thing for too long. But I would love to be fully immersed in the narrative feature film world. I do want to hopefully have shot my first feature as a DOP, hopefully in 10 or 15 years' time. Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh.
Yeah, of course you. You can't get away from this. Even if I've asked you before, it might change. Who knows?
Yeah, I think I also want to go into the film side of things, like the narrative film industry. I think that's why I think this motivated this episode, is because I mentioned in our previous episode that I want to see if there's a different way to get into the film side of things through the way that I'm doing it now. Like my main goal is to build a big enough budget to buy a land somewhere and open my own studio where guys like you can come in and use the studio with all the locations and everything involved, and then I just rock up in my pajamas and people are like, who's this crazy ginger? And I'm like, I own the place. But no, I think I just like...
That's definitely going in the highlight reel.
Bitch, I'm the director.
But I think it's the same as you said, it's making someone feel something. Not necessarily just telling a story, it's making them feel the story as well. And I think I've been through a lot of things in my life where I know I'm not going to be able to be this director or be able to tell this story in this way. But I think the main goal in the end is to give guys the platform to do that without the constraints that the traditional method or the gatekeeping that most people have in the industry.
Sublime. Yeah. Well, Stark Lui, Adam, Alex, thank you for joining me here today. I really appreciate the time and for sharing all your expertise and the journeys that you've all gone along. You all inspire me very, very much, and I very much look forward to watching the next 10 to 15 years unfold. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This has been lots of
fun.
fun.
Yeah,
Bring us back. What's your goal for the next 10, 15 years?
Make lots of podcasts and see where that takes me.
Yeah, always happy to come back at any point because this is a lot of fun.
We'll be back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know I probably said a lot of things without saying anything, so cut those bits out.
Yeah. Same for me, please.
No, definitely not. Definitely a lot more intelligible than me. But to everyone who watched us, thank you for joining as well. If you made it to the end, congratulations. Hopefully we didn't chat too much nonsense, and until the next one.